This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate first part of what if Naruto was chased out of the village and found Universal Sword. If you enjoy this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
The outskirts of Konoha. Why did Naruto not realize that he was running for his life? He only knew that he had little chance of surviving past this night if he were caught. The young Naruto was being pursued by a group of villagers, the majority of whom were civilians, but there were also some Chunin and Junin ninjas strewn about the crowd, shouting profanities alongside the others. The frantic blonde said, "Huff huff, why are they chasing me? They've never tried to hurt me, so why now? Sure, they usually glare at me or try to avoid me while muttering nasty things under their breath." With the demon boy finally gone, the majority of the villagers began to leave, believing they had done a good job of chasing him away and hoping he wouldn't come back. Now that the majority of the villagers had left, only a few remained pursuing him, either as hopeful Chunin hoping to gain some recognition by killing the evil demon and becoming a village hero, or as enraged ninja hoping to put an end to the demon that had taken their loved ones from them. Eventually, the kunai and shuriken begin to fly, but the majority of them are lost due to the thick tree cover surrounding the village. However, a fortunate shot or two caused Naruto to sustain some scratches or get impaled somewhere on his body. The young blonde, sobbing from the agony of his recent wounds, cried out, "Gah, why are you trying to kill me? We're both villagers of the same village, so why are you trying to kill me?" One of the Junin from the group pursuing him yelled, "Ha, like you can be called a villager, you're just a demon brat who should have been dealt with a long time ago. Well, now I think it's time we made up for the mistake of letting you live. Law or no law, you will die today." Our young protagonist's new turn of events is likely explained by the fact that most of them smell like alcohol, which is the only reason they haven't caught up to him. Suddenly, Naruto saw the river flowing in front of him. The terrified blonde thought, "Damn it, it's too wide to jump over and it's flowing too fast to try to cross." One of the pursuing ninjas said, "Ha, we've got you cornered now, demon, so give up and maybe we'll try to make this as painless as possible," while the others all smirked or grinned maniacally, knowing that the chase was coming to an end and that the repulsive demon would soon be dead. When Naruto finally arrived at the river, he was watching in fear, trying to figure out how to get across before the others could catch up. Subsequently, one of the ninja removed a Fuma shuriken from his back, drew back his arm, and hurled it directly at Naruto. He was searching for a way out with his back to the group and failed to notice the spiraling weapon that was aimed directly at his back. Thud! And Naruto's eyes widened as the shuriken suddenly made contact with his back. He then turned to see it protruding from his back. Then, with the weapon still protruding from his back and his body lying limp at the mercy of the current, Naruto began to collapse in the direction of the river and eventually fell into it, being carried away from the ninja gang. The group cheered when they finally saw that the damned demon was dead and that they were no longer forced to watch him wander the streets carelessly or boast about becoming Hokage, which to them was the worst sin because they imagined him corrupting their village with his demonic self. With the demon brat dead and their Yondaime avenged, the group turned around and returned to the village in the hopes of telling the others that they would no longer have to worry about their families. The office of the Hokage. Sitting behind his desk in his office, Hiruzen Sarutobi was currently facing his long-standing worst enemy, the paperwork that every Kage must deal with. Sigh, when will I ever be free from this accursed paperwork? Maybe I should go visit Naruto, that'll give me a little reprieve while allowing me to see how the young boy is doing, the Hokage said with a grin on his face. Hiruzen was about to yell at the person who would so rudely enter his office when the door to his office suddenly burst open with a bang. Suddenly, he saw a terrified and wide-eyed Kakashi standing in the open doorway. When he saw Kakashi's behavior, the rage he had been feeling moments before vanished as fast as they had arrived. Although Kakashi was typically a calm and lethargic Junin who frequently arrived late, he would never be seen in a panic like he was right now. "Kakashi, what's the matter?" a worried Hiruzen inquired. "It's Naruto, sir. Some ninja just arrived saying how they chased the demon brat outside the village and finally ridded the village of the demon," said a still frantic Kakashi. He immediately confronted the ninja after hearing what they had to say, demanding explanations for their statements. They told him with pride how they pursued the demon outside the village, cornered him at a river, and used a Fuma shuriken to impale him through the back before the river carried his body away. When it was mentioned that the shuriken had killed the demon brat, one of the ninja was looking very proud, which helped Kakashi identify the person who killed his sensei's son, Chidori, and after that, the person who killed Naruto was lying at his feet, his heart missing and smoking. Kakashi had already left and was making his way directly to the Hokage Tower before any of the other ninja could recover from the shock they had all experienced after witnessing the hero for the demon brat's brutal murder in front of them. He went to see the Hokage to get some Anbu and Junin so they could go look for the young blonde because he couldn't believe Naruto was dead. It would be an understatement to say Hiruzen was stunned. He was at a loss for words before realizing what was going on. Before a group of Anbu appeared before the god of shinobi, Hiruzen said, "Anbu, half of you follow Kakashi to where the ninja said they cornered Naruto, and the other half of you bring me the ones that claim to be the ones responsible for his death." After that, Kakashi and all of the Anbu disappeared from his office. The Sandaime sat back in his chair with a horrified expression on his face, thinking, "Please, please, don't let Naruto be dead." He wiped his face quickly because, if what they said was true, the Anbu returned a moment later with the person who was responsible for the death of his surrogate's grandson. After rescuing the village from the demon brat, the group of ninja were about to grumble about their treatment when the elderly Hokage unleashed his killing intent, but they all recoiled. Even though the ki wasn't aimed at the Anbu, the Hokage's murderous intent was still permeating the room and making them start to perspire. "Tell me exactly what happened and what made you decide to chase after and kill a citizen of this village," he demanded. His head had already been severed from his shoulders before he could finish the sentence. Well sir, us and a group of civilians were chasing after the demon bra. The Hokage was now standing beside the headless body, holding a bloody kunai. "I believe there is still a law stating that the mention of said topic will lead to death," the Hokage glared, sending a message to the other ninjas in the room that they would perish if they even considered the word demon brat. The Hokage said, "Now will someone else tell me what it is I wish to know," as he repressed some of the killing intent he had released when he had beheaded the ninja just moments before, giving them the ability to breathe again after they had been so terrified by all the ki the Sandaime was releasing. L. Like H. He was saying U.S. and so. Some civilians W. We're chasing AF. FTER Naruto the EV. Everyone but us headed back to the village, WH. While we continued to CH. Chase him before cornering him at a river before one of us TH. Threw a Fuma shuriken at his back which then impaled him and sent him into the river before he was stuck in his back. Hiruzen glared at the ninjas throughout the story until he had to exert almost divine self-control to prevent himself from tearing the heads off of every ninja in front of him near the end. The ninja were beginning to feel optimistic when he said, "Get them out," but he went on. "Send them to the prisons until tomorrow for when they will be publicly executed for murder of a fellow Konoha citizen." After that, the Anbu pulled the ninjas from the Hokage's office and led them to the prison, where they would spend their final night with the living. Kakashi reappeared before Hiruzen's desk after everyone had left except for the Hokage. After seeing Kakashi's face, Hiruzen's glimmer of hope that he would find Nato alive but injured so that he could be saved vanished. With a dejected expression and tone, Kakashi said, "I'm sorry, but we couldn't find his body. We did find the river and a spot of blood where Naruto must have been standing when he was hit, but we couldn't find anything else." Hiruzen said, "I see, please leave, I need to be alone," and Kakashi nodded in understanding. Like him, he also wanted to be left alone to confront the reality that Naruto was no longer there and probably dead. Kakashi drank himself to sleep that night, just as he had done following the deaths of his sensei and his team. Now that he was by himself in his office, Hiruzen pulled out a cup and a bottle of sake, then filled it with the liquid to try to quench the limitless despair he was experiencing at the moment. Hiruzen looked at a picture of the Yondaime Hokage and let a tear fall. The image of Naruto's father, who appeared to be staring back at him, had finally let go of tears that had not been seen since he was a ninja. Hiruzen muttered, "I'm sorry, I've failed you Minato," before the sadness that had been building since Naruto's death overcame him. Unknown region. With his eyes closed, Naruto was sinking with water all around him and heading headfirst wherever the water was taking him. His eyes started to open as his body started to level out, but he kept flipping until he landed on his feet. He appeared to land on a solid surface that was still submerged, with nothing else visible. As he began to look around, he discovered that he was by himself and that everything was dark. When light began to shine through the area he was trying to step on after taking a step forward, he pulled his foot back and returned it to its previous position. The darkness on the ground began to move as the light began to expand, but what he initially believed to be darkness turned out to be doves taking flight from their previous location. He looked around and saw doves rising from the ground all around him, soaring to unknown heights. Upon re-examining the area after all the doves had left, Naruto discovered that he was standing on a circular platform that showed a stunning woman with dark hair wearing a dress of yellow, white, and blue, holding a red apple in her hand. Her hair was held in place by a red hairband. 7 strange-looking men's faces surrounded the woman. Then words came to him. "There is so much to do. Not much time. Go slowly, don't be scared." The door remains closed. Go ahead now. Are you able to do it? As though responding to the question the words posed, Naruto began to move forward. He began to slow down as he approached the center of the platform and looked around. Until, at last, he came to a stop in the center of the platform, still surveying his surroundings. A podium with a red, bordered black shield and 3 red circles. One large in the center and 2 smaller ones attached to the upper left and right of the larger circle, appeared to his left. You are the source of power. To his right, a second podium emerged with a tiny stick that had the same 3 circles attached to it, but it was blue this time. If you give it a shape. A third and final podium materialized in front of him, featuring a white, bladed sword, a yellow guard with a red gem in the center and a blue hilt, and the 3 circles once more, but this time in black, on the gem. You'll gain strength from it. Make wise decisions. The words reappeared in Naruto's mind as he reached for the sword first. The warrior's power. Unbeatable bravery. A terrible sword of destruction. Then, like with the sword, the words reappeared as Naruto approached and picked up the shield. The guardian's power. Helpfulness to friends. A barrier to keep everyone out. At last, he approached and picked up the strange stick. Like the other 2, the words resurfaced in his mind. The mystic's power. Inner fortitude. A staff of ruin and wonder. He returned to the sword and picked it up after examining all 3 of the items on the podiums. Once more, the words emerged. Do you want this kind of power? Deciding that it was the power he desired in order to have the ability to fight back and never have to worry about dying while being pursued. As though in reaction to his decision, the words reappeared. Your course is predetermined. What will you do now? Give up in return. Naruto now glanced at the other 2, attempting to decide which one to give up, before a dejected expression appeared on his face. He decided that was what he wanted to give up and went over to the shield. Why would he need the shield if there was nothing or no one to protect? In the village, everyone shunned him like the plague and scowled at him, with only a few people wanting to be near him. Other than the Hokage and a few people he might have hung out with in the village, he had no one to call precious. However, since he is no longer there, there would be no way for him to protect them. The words appeared after he picked up the shield once more. You see this authority? With unwavering determination, he determined that this power was not his, and he relinquished it. Now that the shield was gone, he felt a part of himself disappear, and he was genuinely alone. The words reappeared as though to disprove his assertion. The power is yours. Of the combatant, you've relinquished control. Of the guardian, do you select this form? With his resolve set, he decided that this would be the path he would take, even though the question appeared to give him another chance to choose a different one. At that point, the podium started to sink back into the earth. The floor started to break, and since the floor was gone, he started to drop into the dark abyss below. He continued to drop, seemingly with no end in sight. Then, out of nowhere, he sees another platform in front of him that depicts a different woman, this time wearing a dress that is almost entirely white in shades of blue and purple. Before he landed safely on his feet without suffering any injuries, his free fall started to slow down. There were no indications of how quickly he had been falling, which would have undoubtedly resulted in his death. A flash of light brought the sword into his grasp, and a moment later, the words were back in his mind. You've acquired the ability to fight. With the sword he had selected, Naruto took a test swing. The words resurfaced after he recovered from his swing. Okay. You've got it. Make use of this authority to defend both yourself and other people. Then, as the words continued to play in his mind, a shadow materialized on the ground. There will be occasions when you must engage in combat. Then the shadow emerged from the earth as a small humanoid creature with 2 antennas on its head and hunched over, pure yellow eyes. Subsequently, a second shadow emerged in front of him, starting to emerge from the earth similarly to the first. Continued to shine brightly. The strange monsters started to show up more and more. After that, Naruto prepared for the impending battle. When the first monster near him leapt to attack, Naruto leapt and charged directly at the creature, swinging at it. He knocked the monster back toward the ground by performing a combo that began with an upward swing and ended with a downward one. Then, avoiding the monster's claw swipes, he started to circle around them in an attempt to assemble them in one location. He then started making horizontal swings that would hit several monsters with a single blow, enabling him to hit every monster he had gathered in front of him. The others began to back up after he executed a spinning horizontal swing that eliminated several monsters. After that, they retreated to the floor and vanished from view. One of the monsters emerged behind him, seemingly to stealthily eliminate the one it perceives as its adversary. Thankfully, the warning words reappeared. In your rear, Naruto then turned to face the monster that was trying to harm him from behind. As soon as the monster was spotted, more began to show up, seemingly aware that the plan had failed and wanting to defeat him by sheer numbers. Then, Naruto turned to face the person closest to him, thrust his sword out in a straight jab, followed by a vertical slash downward. Using the momentum from the slash, he spun around, slashing the monster in a backhanded horizontal slash that killed the opponent. Then, with apparently successful results, he defeated the other enemies in a similar manner, demonstrating that his fighting strategy was effective. Anyone who saw him fighting with a weapon he had never used before would have been astounded by how freely he seemed to be using it, allowing attacks to flow into follow-up attacks that seemed to never end, as if he were fighting like a master in both ground and aerial combat. Even though he only needed to use a few attacks to defeat the monsters, it was difficult to capture them because they appeared to be able to move and sink back into the ground, making it impossible for him to strike them until they emerged. As quickly as they arrived, they sank back into the earth, obscuring the floor until there was only darkness left, at which point they began dragging him downward. Despite his best efforts, he was unable to free himself and eventually sank straight through the floor. He was now completely encircled by darkness, and despite his best efforts, he was unable to break free. The darkness then vanished as if he wished it away, and he found himself lying down on a different platform that this time represented a heart. When he eventually regained his orientation and stood up again, he saw a door with a light shining on it on the opposite side of the platform. He went to the door and attempted to open it, but to no avail. Then, behind him, a second light shone down on the opposite side of the platform, and an elaborately patterned chest materialized in a flash of light. The chest was empty when he opened it. A crate materialized in the center of the platform with yet another burst of light. Then he opened the crate and discovered a glass filled with an odd green liquid. From its seemingly transparent appearance, a portion of the door shone and solidified. Another flash showed a barrel off to his right. The remainder of the door solidified after he broke the barrel in the same way that he broke the crate. Now that the door was solid, he opened the previously unreachable door. He stepped back as the door began to open in front of him, and light began to shine through the opening. With his eyes shielded, he moved toward the light and through the door to discover that there were 3 people in the classroom at the academy in Konoha. First, there was Iruka, his surrogate older brother and sensei, who always seemed to watch out for him. When Iruka asked him, "What's most important to you?" Naruto seemed to have 3 answers that came to mind. Being number 1, friendship, and his prized possessions. After carefully considering the 3 options, he ultimately chose friendship because, despite the fact that few people wanted to be his friends, he believed that the few people who were his friends were the most important to him. Iruka asked him, "Is friendship such a big deal?" Then he approached Hiruzen, his surrogate grandfather, who was the second individual. "What do you want out of life?" Hiruzen then asked him again. 3 things came to mind for Naruto. To see rare sights, to broaden his horizons, or to be strong. After giving it some more thought, he once more chose strength for the same reasons he chose the sword, which seemed to have been chosen ages ago but was actually only moments ago. To be strong, huh? Hiruzen asked. When Naruto finally reached the third person, he was shocked to see that it was Hinata, a classmate. He was taken aback, though, by the fact that, in contrast to the other 2, whom he knew well, he had hardly spent time with Hinata. Like the other 2, Hinata asked him, "What are you afraid of?" The last 3 responses, being different, being indecisive, and being alone, came to mind right away. He didn't need to think about it to determine which of the 3 he was genuinely afraid of, in contrast to the other 2. The thing that frightened him the most was being completely alone, without anyone to care for or care about him. Like the other 2, Hinata questioned his response, asking, "Being alone? Is that really so scary?" The words reappeared after he had finished responding to the 3 individuals in front of him. You're looking for friendship. You wish to possess strength. You fear being by yourself. Dawn is when your adventure starts. When the sun is shining, the trip ought to be enjoyable. Then everything turned to light, blinding his eyes, and he found himself on another platform. This time, the platform featured a stunning woman with long blonde hair wearing a purple dress, holding a rose to her chest with both hands, and surrounded by thorns. Until he came to the woman's head on the platform, Naruto began to move to the opposite side. He drew his sword and readied himself for battle as the monsters behind him began to reappear. Before he knew it, the monsters were all around him, rising from the earth in a circle. Before turning around and using a backhand slash to push back one that was attempting to sneak up on him, he charged at the first one in front of him, eliminating it with a thrust and 2 horizontal slashes. With the monster's defenses down, he charged and, like so many others before it, killed it with an overhead chop. He had 4 more to eliminate after losing 2. Then he leapt at one of the shadows in front of him, descending with a forceful thrust that was sufficient to eliminate the opponent with a single blow. When he was crouching on the ground, he gave the person next to him a thrust upward, sending it skyward, where he quickly followed it and killed it with a swift slash before deftly standing up, his gaze already fixed on his next foe. He then executed 2 strong horizontal slashes, the first of which knocked their guard away by blocking their attempted swipes at him. Then, with their guard gone, he executed a second slash that took them both out with a single swipe. After every monster was vanquished, a beam of light descended, illuminating the platform in a tiny circle. He approached the circle of light until he was standing directly on top of it, at which point he could see that the light was actually a light shade of green. The circle of light beneath him began to shift to the opposite side of the platform, where smaller, square, multicolored platforms that appeared to be made of glass began to appear. He found a path that led to what appeared to be another platform similar to the one he was standing on as platform after platform quickly materialized. Then he proceeded to the other platform along the apparently brittle path. When he arrived at the platform, he noticed that, like the others, it featured a stunning woman wearing a dress that was all yellow. The words reappeared in his mind as he continued to move forward. As you approach the light, the larger your shadow gets. He turned his head and saw his own shadow stretching behind him. His shadow then started to rise from the ground like the previous monsters. Startled, he moved away from his shadow, which keeps rising from the earth and getting bigger. Don't be scared, though. The shadow began to take on a monstrous form that no longer resembled him, and as its body became more defined, it took a step. Additionally, remember, now that it was fully grown, its face was completely black, with yellow eyes and long hair that moved around its head like tentacles. A scarf that appeared to be as black as the rest of its body covered the lower portion of its mouth. Naruto then started to flee from the monster, but he stopped at the platform's far edge and nearly fell off, only to be met by an endless black abyss. When he turns around, he sees the monster get up from its stooped position and stand tall and straight. There was a big hole in its upper body that appeared to be shaped like a heart. It had tiny wings on its back that were composed of the same black, inky material as the rest of its body. He readied his sword, anticipating a battle that, based on appearances, would be unlike any other. He charged at the monster first, then leapt to his feet and slashed at its left hand from above, apparently doing no harm. While charging up a dark ball in its right hand, the monster tries to follow up with an upward swipe, moves its hand out of the way, pulls his right arm back, and then smashes it into the ground. When the monster's hand was within reach, he charged its right hand and executed a downward slash, a straight thrust, and a spinning backhand slash. The area where his hand touched the ground began to turn dark and inky black. The smaller monsters began to emerge from the black hole the giant had created once he had completed the 3-dot hit combo. Then, in order to strike the giants and eliminate the smaller creatures, Naruto began to make broad, horizontal slashes. He began to fully concentrate on the giant's hand once more after the smaller ones had all been consumed. Then, as more of the smaller monsters appeared to drop out of the sky, the monster rose again. Then, as the giant appeared to be beyond his reach, Naruto began to eliminate the smaller ones. Naruto was able to regain access to the monster's hands when it knelt down, but it appeared that an orb of darkness emerged from the heart-shaped hole. This orb then proceeded to shoot out phantasm-like beings that would ram into Naruto as he was attacking the monster. However, it appeared that the monster was going to be vanquished because of all the damage Naruto was inflicting on it. As though he could have predicted the future, the monster finally couldn't handle the damage, so in a desperate attempt, he tried to swipe at Naruto, which he managed to avoid but not before losing his balance. As Naruto fell on his backside, all he could do was watch as his sword vanished and the monster, with all its might, stood in front of him, ready to deliver what appeared to be the end. Without Naruto's awareness, a tiny circle of darkness materialized beneath him and the words reappeared. But don't be scared. As the words went on, the darkness began to rise and engulf him. The most powerful weapon of all is in your possession. Naruto attempted to battle the darkness, but as before, it seemed to be ineffective as it kept engulfing him while the giant watched. Eventually, the darkness consumed his entire body, causing him to lose consciousness. When Naruto first found himself on the first platform, the location was unknown. A portal of darkness appeared next to Naruto's body, which had been washed up back on land with the Fuma shuriken still protruding from it. A man wearing a black cloak emerged from the portal, covering his entire body, Organization 13 cloak. The man said to himself, I wonder what world this is, it surely isn't one I've been to before, as he looked around, attempting to determine where he had ended up. Then, from below him, he heard what sounded like the moan of someone in pain, His eyes widened as he looked down and saw a young, blond boy in an orange jumpsuit lying face down on the dirt, completely soaked, with a giant shuriken protruding from his back. In an attempt to assist the child in any way, the man hurriedly knelt down, but as he did so, he sensed the presence of a keyblade bearer nearby. "It can't be, can it?" the man muttered to himself as he looked around in an attempt to spot anyone nearby. When he was unsuccessful, he turned back to the boy. With one quick jerk, he grabbed the giant shuriken with his other hand and pulled it straight out of the boy's back while placing a hand on his back. After determining that the boy was still alive after what appeared to be a fatal blow, he checked for a pulse. To get a closer look at the boy, he flipped him over and removed his hood. The person beneath the hood had a black blinder over his eyes and long, disheveled silver hair. He stood back up with the boy in his arms and quickly raised the blinder for a brief moment to get a glimpse of the boy before drawing it back over his eyes. Before leaving for the closest settlement, he said, "Well, it seems like wherever I am I seems like I was meant to be here if the boy has a keyblade." The whiskered boy's back began to heal, but he was unaware of it. Unknown location. Naruto opened his eyes drowsily, attempting to blink away his slumber. Glancing around, he discovered that he was lying on a bed in a tiny room. After removing the sheets, he discovered that he was shirtless and that his midsection was bandaged. The sight of the bandages brought back memories from before he passed out. His eyes widened in terror as he searched the area for any indications of danger or ninjas who might have returned to attack him. When he doesn't see any danger, he lets himself unwind before focusing on his strange dream. He asked himself, was it even a dream? It felt so real, and I could have sworn I felt pain when getting hit by those monster-looking things. I mean, where would I even be able to imagine all that stuff from? He checked his body for bruises in the areas he had been struck in the dream, but there were none. After noticing that there were no bruises, he came to the conclusion that either it was a dream or he had been away from it long enough for the bruises to heal. Then, with his legs wobbling and making it difficult for him to maintain his balance, he swung them over the edge of the bed and began to attempt to stand up. He struggled for control of his seemingly useless legs for a few seconds before losing it and falling backward onto the bed. He muttered to himself, trying to think of something to do. Sigh. "Well, I guess I just gotta either wait for my legs to regain feeling or hope somebody comes to check on me," he said. After a few minutes of waiting, the room's door began to open, and someone completely wrapped in a black cloak emerged. The man asked, "Ah, I see you're awake. Tell me how you're feeling." "I'm surprised you're awake, let alone able to move as you can now after seeing a giant shuriken sticking out of your back, to which should have been fatal," the cloaked figure said after a few seconds, after which Naruto concluded the man wasn't hostile. "I feel fine, except I can't really seem to stand at the moment." The man nodded in understanding. As he rubbed the back of his neck, Naruto began to explain, "Well, I've always been a fast healer, so that probably explains why I'm healthy like I am now." The man seemed intrigued by the boy's apparent extraordinary healing abilities, but he chose to put it aside for the time being in order to ask an even more crucial question. "So, how exactly did you come to have a giant shuriken sticking out of your back?" Naruto appeared reluctant to respond, which the stranger seemed to notice when he remarked, "You don't have to tell me, but it would be helpful to know why I ended up saving a boy from what seemed to be attempted murder." When the man was mentioned as Naruto's savior, his head shot upwards. He sighed and readied himself to explain how he got into his current situation. "I was running from some shinobi from my village who then cornered me near a river. One of the ninjas from the group then threw and impaled me with the Fuma shuriken, and with both the momentum of the throw and my loss of feeling in my body I collapsed forward to be swept away by the river." I'm sure I feel the presence of a keyblade radiating from him, but it seems he has yet to summon it," the stranger thought as he nodded after considering what the boy had told him, which also seemed to explain why the boy was near a river while completely drenched. He then moved on to the next topic of interest. "Tell me, do you know what a keyblade is?" The only response he received was a bewildered look, which was sufficient to tell the man that the boy had never heard of the word, much less understood. "What's your name?" he asked after realizing that he still didn't know the boy's name. "Hey, isn't it polite to give your own name before asking for someone else's, and besides, what's with the hood? I can't even see your face," Naruto remarked in response. The man then lowered his hood so the boy could see his face. "Riku." The only response he received was a perplexed look. "Naruto," the boy smirked back, "my name," seemingly mocking the way Riku presented his own name. "Can you stand yet?" Riku asked the boy. "Gimme a sec, let me try again," he replied when he attempted to stand again, this time with greater success than the last time. After a few stumbles, he finally got to his feet and smiled at Riku, showing him a little bit of his stubborn personality. Riku nodded and turned around, saying only, "Follow me," before leaving the room to follow Riku. Naruto, not wanting to be left behind, left the room to follow Riku. "I asked you before if you knew what a keyblade was," but from your expression I could conclude that you don't, so I will now tell you, Riku said after leading him out of the house and into the yard in front of the house that appeared to be abandoned. Naruto asked, perplexed by the still unfamiliar term, not that I'm complaining, but why do I have to know what a Keyblade is? Riku's response, the reason you need to know what a Keyblade is because I can sense the presence of a Keyblade radiating from you, caught Naruto off guard. With a shocked expression on his face, he asked him, wait, how do I have this Keyblade thing if I don't even know what it is, after discovering that he might have acquired something he was unaware of. In response to the boy's question, Riku said, the Keyblade isn't really something you just pick up off the ground, adding, no, the Keyblade is a power that is awakened in a select few. Currently I know of 2 people besides myself who can wield the Keyblade. Riku's mind then wandered to the picture of his friend Sora and King Mickey, but he chose not to include the boy named Roxas because he was essentially able to use his power. A power that's awakened, what does he mean by that? But Naruto thought of his previous dream. Could that have anything to do with the Keyblade Riku kept mentioning? Hey Riku, how does a person go about awakening their Keyblade? Naruto asked, attempting to determine whether he had actually woken up to some enigmatic power from the realistic dream he had had. In an attempt to collect his thoughts and come up with a way to explain this to him, Riku replied, well, most people awaken the power of the Keyblade when they are presented with a difficult journey presented before them. In an attempt to avoid embarrassing himself, Naruto cautiously inquired, does a dream have anything to do with awakening the Keyblade? Yes, sometimes the power can be awakened in what seems to be a dream where the Keyblade wielder must make choices that could greatly affect the wielder. Hey, sounds like the dream I had, choices and all, Naruto muttered after learning the truth of the dream. Riku then turned to face Naruto and looked him in the eyes to see if he was truly telling the truth. When he saw no signs of lying, he responded. He asked, so I guess I really do have a Keyblade, but how do I use it, after realizing that he now possessed an enigmatic power? I guess you could try thinking about something important to you and wanting the power to protect that which is important to you, then focus all those thoughts and emotions and try to summon the strength that will allow you to achieve it, Riku said, trying to think through the process of summoning the Keyblade because it has become so automatic to him that he doesn't really need to think about it anymore. After closing his eyes and reflecting on what he really valued, a number of faces, including those of Hokage, Jiji, Teuchi, Ayame, and Iruka, appeared. Now that he was thinking about those people, he tried to evoke a desire to protect them, which arose as though it was waiting for him to summon it. In an attempt to summon the strength to do so, he directs the strength and power he senses into his hand, and in a flash of light, he is holding what appears to be a huge key. The Kingdom Key, the same one used by the king and also the first Keyblade Sora acquired. This boy does indeed have a challenging destiny ahead of him, although that seems to come with the territory of being a Keyblade bearer, Riku said after being shocked by the summoned Keyblade. The Kingdom Key, Riku said aloud, drawing Naruto's attention. I thought it was called the Keyblade unless, does he mean there are different types of Keyblades? Naruto was staring at the weapon he had summoned with a funny expression before a look of understanding crossed his face. No wonder it's called a Keyblade, the thing's a giant freaking key. Naruto then made the decision to ask the question that had been on his mind. Do you mean that there are other kinds of Keyblades when you say Kingdom Key? Yes, there are different types of Keyblades and some people can actually wield several different types, Riku said, astonished that the boy had reached that conclusion while only stating one thing. You see that chain attached to the bottom of the Keyblade, he said, and the young blonde's expression changed to one of wonder. You see that chain attached to the bottom of the Keyblade, he said, confirming the idea that the dream was his awakening. If you acquire more chains you can swap them out to use different Keyblades, each one with different abilities. For instance, the Kingdom Key has an ability called Defender, meaning that whenever the wielder is stuck in a pinch, your defense will rise and you will end up taking less damage. There are also some people who can wield multiple Keyblades at once, but the only person I know who can do it needs some outside assistance to do so, Riku said, drawing Naruto even more into the realm of the Keyblade. After Riku had completed his explanation, he extended his hand in front of him, and his own Keyblade materialized with a flash of light. Riku said, well, now that that's out of the way, let's see if you can use that thing and what other abilities you have, and then he prepared himself. Soon after, Naruto followed him in his own ready stance, which startled Riku greatly. That stance is the same as Sora's, Riku said, and they both smirked as they charged at each other with their Keyblades ready. Skip a year in time. Beyond Konoha, standing a short distance from Konoha, a figure wearing a black cloak similar to Riku's was gazing at the hidden village as memories of the village began to resurface in his mind. Konoha, it's been a while, hey, exactly a year in fact. The cloaked figure said, well, I guess it's time I go see how Gigi's doing, oh, and Iruka too. Hey, can't wait to get to Ichiraku's. I haven't been able to find anything nearly as good, as the portal vanished after the figure entered the office of the Hokage. Since this was the day his surrogate grandson had died, Hiruzen was sitting in his chair with a bottle of sake beside him, consuming the agony of what this day had brought to the forefront of his thoughts. Damn it, Naruto, why'd you have to die? You have done nothing to deserve what you've been through, nor did you deserve the death you received. Sarutobi sent the culprits to Ibiki and Enko on the day of Naruto's death in order to get information from them about the identities of the other people who assisted in Naruto's escape from the village. The damn civilian council intervened and prevented him from learning the truth just as he was about to administer the justice Naruto deserved. As he reached for his cup, darkness emerged from the ground, forming what appeared to be a portal. The professor had never heard of or seen any jutsu capable of such a feat, so the Hokage was completely taken aback. However, when someone entered the portal closed behind them and vanished. It was impossible to identify the figure because they were completely hidden by a black cloak that obscured everything else. The Hokage demanded, "Who are you and what are you doing here?" wondering if he was being attacked by an assassin of some kind. As the figure laughed, "Ah, come on Gigi, lighten up some." When those words were spoken, Hiruzen froze, but one word in particular had the biggest impact on him. "Gigi, only 2 people have ever called me that, and I know for a fact that this isn't Konohamaru. That only leaves one other person, but he's dead, but then again his body was never found. Circa, could it be NN Naruto?" the elderly man asked, hope flickering inside of him, hoping that this person might be him. The figure said, "Hee hi Gigi, it's been a while," as he removed his hood. Hiruzen saw a face he thought he would never see again because the child in front of him had long, spiky blonde hair. His hair is blonde, just like Riku's from Kingdom Hearts 2, and 3 whisker marks on each cheek. However, he was blinded by a black blinder, which he mistook for the ocean blue eyes that he was so familiar with from Kingdom Hearts 2. In an instant, Hiruzen was standing up from his desk and giving his surrogate grandson, whom he believed to be long dead, a hug. Instead of being shocked by the unexpected contact, Naruto simply gave him a hug in return and grinned slightly because, after a long year, he was at last at home. 5 minutes later, time skip after controlling most of his emotions, Hiruzen sat behind his desk staring at Naruto as if he would vanish if he looked away for even a moment. The Hokage could only ask, "Naruto H. How are you alive?" since the person in front of him had been declared dead a year prior. Well, a year ago when I was impaled in the back," Hiruzen said, wincing at the memory of the incident. "And was brought back ashore and found by a man named Riku. He then brought me to a place to recover while I was healing from the stab wound. Once I was finally healed, he asked me how I came to even have the wound. So after telling him what happened, he offered to train me." Hiruzen could only raise an eyebrow at how Riku taught Naruto. "For the next 8 months Riku trained me until he had to leave. Then for the next 4 months I spent mastering my skills that I was taught while wandering the fire country," Naruto said. Hiruzen could only nod in agreement with the information Naruto gave him, but then Naruto asked him a question that he should have actually anticipated. "So Gigi, can I go back to the academy to become a ninja again?" Hiruzen had to decide what to do because the genin exams would be given to the class that Naruto was originally a part of in a week. He could either let Naruto take the exam or wait a year to make up for the time lost. He decided to ask Naruto if he believed he was capable of attempting such an assignment. "Naruto, in the class you were previously attending, they are about to take the genin exams, so here are the choices I present to you. You could either take the genin exams if you think you are ready or be held back a year to make up for the lost time. I believe this mainly focuses though on whether you think the training this Riku person you mentioned has prepared you enough to attend the exam." When it was mentioned that he could take the genin exams, Naruto was overjoyed because, to be honest, at his current power level, he far outperformed the academy level. Without even trying, he could likely achieve top scores on all of the exams at his current level. The obvious response was, "I'll try my hand at the genin exams Gigi," as Naruto would have likely taken the test even if he wasn't at his current level. Even though he could ace the tests right now, he wanted to avoid the spotlight and try to hide his strength for as long as possible because he didn't know how people would react if they found out. "I think it's about time you go say hi to Iruka. I'm sure you will be beyond happy at knowing that you're still alive." While you see him give him that note, it's basically a permission note to allow you to attend the genin exams even though you've been gone, Hiruzen said, grinning at the young blonde's response before grabbing a piece of paper and writing something down. He then folded it up and gave it to Naruto. "Hey Naruto. Do you think you can get to Iruka though the same way you got here, which by the way you will have to explain to me sometime?" Hiruzen asked, looking thoughtful as he tried to think of a way out of this situation. Naruto nodded, looking happy at the prospect of seeing his surrogate older brother. He then pulled his hood back over his face and asked, Is it alright for me to just walk down the roads? I'm pretty sure many people will think they've seen a ghost. Naruto then called forth another portal of darkness with a sheepish expression, and as the Hokage watched in stunned silence, he thought, I really can't wait for when he explains to me how the hell he did that, before shifting his focus to other things, such as the news of Naruto's return. Hiruzen then summoned his secretary, who he instructed to call a council meeting that would include both the shinobi and the civilian side. Naruto was still a civilian and not yet a ninja, so he wished he could exclude the civilian side from the meeting. Academy of Ninjas, after class. Iruka was sitting behind his desk, either grading or filling out class-related paperwork. In reality, he was doing more work than was necessary and could have left a while ago, but for the time being he was trying to drown himself in work to keep his mind from thinking about what had happened a year ago. Iruka finished the paper he was filling out and put his pen down, saying, damn it, I would give anything just for one of his pranks, at least then he would still be around. He was about to start working on the next piece of paper when he was startled by a portal of darkness that appeared from the ground in front of his desk, leaving him wide-eyed and with a startled expression on his face. A figure wearing a black cloak that completely covered him, revealing no skin at all, not even the face, which was currently covered by a hood, emerged from the portal. He was further shocked by the way he was addressed when the figure said, Hey Iruka. Sensei, long time no see. I'm sorry, but are you one of my students? The teacher asked, utterly bewildered. Perhaps if he could see the person's face, he could understand what was happening. Hope you haven't forgotten me. I mean, it's only been a year. Maybe I gotta give you some incentive to remember me by. The figure laughed, sending a shiver down his spine that he would only get after learning about the exploits of his class's master prankster. NN Naruto. No, it can't be. I must have worked harder than I thought and now I'm hallucinating. Iruka tried to reason to himself, finding no other explanation for seeing the supposedly dead blonde in front of him. Sorry sensei, but me and my pranks aren't that easy to get rid of, speaking of which I gotta make up for lost time. The blonde concluded with a menacing cackle, seemingly planning out numerous pranks to make up for lost time. Naruto, how are you alive? Iruka uttered, but it was only a whisper as he struggled to regain consciousness and comprehend what the hell was happening. Naruto then told Iruka the same thing he had told Hiruzen about being saved and trained. So why did you end up separating with that Riku person? Iruka asked, wondering why Naruto's savior had to abruptly leave. Well, Riku had some unfinished business, I guess you could say, that he had been putting off for far too long. Naruto replied to his query. I'm pretty sure he said he had a friend who would soon need his help. Rewind. The departure of Riku told Naruto, well, Naruto, I've taught you all I could teach you for the time being. Whatever you may learn is something you will have to learn through experience. 8 months had passed since Riku had discovered Naruto and started training him with the Keyblade, among other things like magic and the fundamentals of the weapon. He had previously explained that he was actually from a world called Destiny Island and had been traveling from world to world for a long time. As you know, I'm not from this world but actually traveling from world to world, Riku said. Well, for the moment I plan to travel and get some of that experience you said I'll need, then after some time of traveling I might head back to Konoha, he said, getting a startled response from Naruto's desire to return to Konoha. Even though a lot of the people seem to hate me there, even enough to try to kill me, there are still some people there who are important to me even now. Well, that'll be one day of a homecoming, Riku said, already attempting to imagine how the villagers would react to the boy. No, he couldn't be called a boy after all he's been through in the training and maturing he's undergone over the past 8 months. And he was thrilled with Naruto's response, primarily because his hatred for his village and what they had done to him hadn't controlled his life or his choices, and he still held on to what was valuable to him. Riku then handed Naruto a charm, saying, well, here Naruto, as a parting gift, adding that it can be used as a means of transportation or to call forth a special kind of ally to fight with you in times of need. To summon them, all you have to do is charge the charm with power and call upon them to aid you and they will appear, Riku explained to Naruto as he took the charm from Riku's outstretched hand. Goodbye Naruto and good luck with your traveling. Same to you Riku. Sensei, Naruto replied. The being that this charm summons is 2 eidolons named the Shiva sisters. After they said their goodbyes, Riku vanished through a portal of darkness, leaving Naruto by himself. Well, let's see how this works, he muttered to himself as he examined the charm. As instructed by Riku, Naruto began to pump the charm with power, and with a cry of Shiva, a huge orb of water with odd markings appeared in front of him, with 2 metallic-looking women floating around a smaller orb inside there. Wow, gotta say that was awesome, Naruto said, looking like a child on Christmas morning, as the 2 sisters exploded out of the orb, which vanished, and then he stood next to him. Suddenly, a small portal of darkness appeared next to Naruto, and after it vanished, All that was left was a letter with something holding it down. Dear Naruto, sorry I almost forgot to give this to you. This here is another summoning charm, but unlike the one I gave you, this charm summons a being of unimaginable power. Only use this as a last resort when no other option is available. Even then use it with extreme caution, for the being that is summoned may be too much for you to control. Sincerely, Riku. Naruto chose to examine the charm more closely. Well, I'll have to be careful if I ever use that, he muttered to himself as he carefully placed the charm in one of his numerous pouches next to the charm of the Shiva sisters. Now, how the heck is this supposed to be used as a mode of transportation? He turned to face the two sisters next to him with a perspiration drop. As if to respond, the two sisters moved in front of him and joined to form a motorcycle. With stars in his eyes, he muttered to himself, well, now that explains that. Now to test this out. And then he got on the motorcycle and sped off into the distance at speeds he never would have imagined, with no idea where he was going. Flashback end. Although he has fought alongside the Shiva sisters numerous times to practice working as a team, he has yet to encounter any circumstances in which he has had to use the risky summon. Instead, he uses the Shiva sisters in motorcycle form whenever possible as a quick and incredibly enjoyable form of transportation. Iruka's eyebrows shot up when he saw what was inside the folded letter. Oh yeah, Iruka. Sensei. Gigi told me to give this to you, Naruto said, passing the letter to him. Naruto, are you sure you want to try for the genin exams? I mean, you've been gone for a year. Naruto laughed at his sensei's concern, saying, don't worry, sensei, I've been training for the most of the time I've been gone. I'm pretty sure I can handle the genin exams. Iruka warned him, alright if you're sure, but please do attend the classes for the week before the exam, anything can help, and Naruto nodded. Naruto cheerfully said, alright. See y'all later, sensei. I have some other people I need to go see that I haven't seen in a while, before vanishing through yet another dark portal. Iruka cursed to himself. Damn it, I never got him to explain me what that is, for his forgetfulness. Monumental stone. As he explained his habitual tardiness, Kakashi was now gazing down at the memorial stone where he had spent most of his time since the deaths of his team and sensei. After Naruto's death, it appeared that his habit had not decreased but rather grown, with him spending an increasing amount of time at the stone. However, he now seemed to be constantly focused on his sensei's name. As though speaking to his deceased sensei, Kakashi said, Sensei, I know I've said this many times, but I've failed you. I couldn't protect him, I just can't protect anyone, and now the damn civilian council and the two elders want me to be a Junin sensei to the Uchiha. Kakashi believed that this was the worst decision they could have made because he would never be able to protect anyone, not his team, his sensei, or even his sensei's son. A portal of darkness materialized behind Kakashi, and a figure fully clothed in a black cloak emerged. It wasn't your fault, you know. Kakashi was taken aback by the unidentified man, who had his guard down and his entire attention focused on the memorial stone. But as soon as he realized what the other person had said, the shock quickly gave way to rage. What would you know, I couldn't do anything to save them and now all of them are dead, he said, the last part barely audible, as if he were speaking to himself. Just because they couldn't be saved doesn't make it your fault someone died, it just means all you have to do is make sure you save everyone else who is important to you so you don't have to face any more people you care about dying, said the individual. But how can I save anyone? I've already failed before. What makes you think I'll succeed the next time someone's life is in danger? Kakashi asked the man, hoping he had the solution. You get stronger, that's all you can do. Get stronger so no matter the situation you will be able to overcome it while saving all the people you care about, the individual told Kakashi. Hey, get stronger huh? Yeah, I guess that'll work, if only I was stronger before though. If only was stronger then maybe I could have saved everyone, my team, my sensei, even Naruto. The past is the past, no matter how much you wish or desire the past will never change, the man said. But if it helps, I can show you something that may decrease the pain you feel, Kakashi said, knowing that no matter how much he hoped, the people he loved were still dead. The man then takes off his hood and reveals his face, just as he had done to the Hokage and Iruka, saying, long time no see Kakashi. Once more, Kakashi was horrified that he could no longer even find his voice because one of the people he loved had previously passed away. He could no longer see his sensei's students' blue eyes, which were now hidden by a black blinder, similar to how he covers his right eye with his headband. He still had the same blonde hair and whisker lines. At last, his voice came back to him. "And Naruto," he said, before removing his headband from his eye to get a clear view of him with his Sharingan. He was afraid that this might be a sick joke involving genjutsu or henge. Naruto raised an eyebrow at his Kakushi's action, not because of the Sharingan, but rather because he already knew about it in his past because the man had told him the tale. One of the few people who genuinely cared about the boy was Kakashi, who occasionally stopped by to check on him and occasionally took him out for ramen. Once more, it was not the Sharingan itself that startled him, but rather the way he showed it to him. A look of comprehension then appeared on his face, and he chose to stop what he knew was about to happen. He told Kakashi, who did notice a genjutsu encircling the boy, "I know what you may be thinking. The genjutsu isn't to hide my identity though. Then explain to me, why do you have a genjutsu on you?" he said, but he knew it was Naruto because the person in front of him shared the same chakra signature as the boy. As he waited for Kakashi to reach a conclusion, Naruto replied, It's actually the same genjutsu that one of the Sannin uses on herself, if that helps you." "Is genjutsu used by Sannin? What does he mean by that?" "Well, I believe Kakashi said that she immediately eliminates Orochimaru and Jiraiya, leaving Tsunade. Tsunade's use of genjutsu now raises the question of why he would need to conceal his age. Something doesn't make sense because he already appears to be the age he should be." Although a little irritated by the short-side remark, Naruto already anticipated Kakashi's question. "Naruto, why do you need to use Tsunade Sama's genjutsu? You look like you're 12, which you are, well, maybe a little on the short side, but you still look 12. Here, gimme a sec, let me remove the genjutsu," said Naruto, who appeared to be between 15 and 16 years old. "Naruto, what happened to you? Why do you look like that?" Kakashi asked, stunned that someone who should have been 12 was standing in front of him looking like he was 15 or 16 years old. That still doesn't explain why you look 16 years old," Naruto said to Kakashi, repeating what he had said to Iruka and the Hokage. Well, it's actually a side effect of a jutsu I was taught. When used, it matures the body at a faster rate until the body is basically at the top of its performance, so once I reach about 21 years old my body should stop aging due to the jutsu," Naruto answered Kakashi. "Damn, I've never even heard of such a jutsu, and I've copied about 1,000 jutsus," Kakashi thought as he considered any jutsu he knew or had heard of that had such a side effect. Finally, though, it occurred to him that this was indeed Naruto. He looked older than he should have, but he was still alive, and he turned his head back to the memorial stone and looked at his sensei's name. Then he recalled what Naruto had said before revealing his identity. "Get stronger, huh? Yeah, I guess I'll do just that, and this time I'll let no one else die," Kakashi thought to himself, his resolve now steeled. "Oh, by the way, Kakashi, I'm going to take the Genin test in a week," Naruto exclaimed, delighted that he would soon become a ninja like Kakashi. "Wait, did he just say he will take the Genin test in a week?" thought Kakashi. "I'm pretty sure that arrogant Uchiha is taking the Genin test in a week. Maybe I can try to persuade the Hokage to get Naruto appointed to my team if he passes." Naruto said, "Well, I gotta go, Kakashi. I still need to go get some sleep." Kakashi was shocked to see how long he had been standing in front of the stone and conversing with Naruto because it was already completely dark outside. "Alright, go get some sleep, Naruto. I've gotta go see the Hokage anyway." After saying, "Wow, it's been a year since I've been back to that place. I bet the place is a mess," Naruto began to walk back to his apartment. Kakashi quickly shunned the Hokage's office after Naruto left. The academy classroom, Iruka informed the other students, "Okay class, today we have a new, well, more like a returning student joining us for the rest of the week who will also be part of the up-and-coming Genin exam." One of the students asked, "Iruka, Sensei, what do you mean returning student?" Iruka replied, "Well, this person hasn't been in class for a year, but instead of retaking the year he missed he will be rejoining this class and has permission to take the Genin exam." "Okay, you can come in now," she said. Someone wearing Sora's attire from Kingdom Hearts 2 entered the classroom wearing a blue short-sleeve shirt underneath a black short-sleeve jacket and black baggy pants with yellow straps around the waist and legs. However, it was the person wearing the clothes, rather than his clothing, that shocked a lot of the students. This person had a grin that was all too familiar, and everyone else's faces were slack-jawed and stunned. He had blonde hair that was all too familiar, and he had whisker marks on both sides of his cheek, the names Naruto Uzumaki, Datbeo. Some people, who were typically the ones who would think negatively of the blonde due to their parents' treatment of him, were completely unaffected by his passing. Some, like Shikamaru, Choji, and Kiba, were devastated by their friend's passing. For some, like Ino, it served as a sobering reminder of how easy it is to lose one's life when someone who was always there suddenly passed away. She began to reflect on her behavior and winces whenever she considers how she handled the blonde. She would then wince once more when her thoughts shifted to how she had been fangirling a certain Uchiha. She had to question why she still liked the guy after giving it some serious thought because he now seemed like a complete jerk to her. Others, such as Shino, who might not have known his classmate well, felt a little saddened because Naruto always made the effort to greet him, despite the fact that most people ignore him due to his quiet nature. Then Hinata appeared. When Hinata learned of the blonde's passing, she was devastated. She had lost the long-term crush she had always seen standing tall and taking on any challenge. After learning of his passing, she quickly went into a depression, stopped talking to people, and either went to training to block out her feelings or sobbed herself to sleep in her room. Despite his seeming indifference to the young Hyuga heiress, her father was genuinely quite upset about his daughter's reaction upon learning of the blonde's passing. Although Hiyashi may come across as aloof, he only does it to appease the Hyuga elders and in the hopes that his daughter will be inspired to challenge him and gain the confidence to stand on her own 2 feet. They view emotions as a sign of weakness, and since Hiyashi was already losing control of the clan to the elders, he didn't want to consider the daring things they might do if they thought he was weak. Hiyashi was also impacted by the young blonde's passing because, in addition to being aware of his daughter's secret crush on the blonde, he was also secretly supporting her. He probably suspected who the boy's parents were because, now that he thinks about it, the answer is fairly obvious, leading him to doubt the village's intelligence. If you remove the whisker marks, you will have a miniature version of his friend Minato the Yondaime Hokage, who passed away. He tried to stand up for the boy because of that alone. Secondly, there was his mother, which is also very clear. Other than the boy, there have only been 2 Uzumakis in all of Konoha. Since Mito is clearly not the boy's mother, Kushina Uzumaki, the friend of his late wife, is the only remaining individual. For him, helping the boy was a way to honor both his late wife and his departed friend. Returning to the class, the majority of people had moved past the news, particularly those who didn't care about the boy and thought it wasn't worth their time. One such person was Uchiha. If Adobe was dead, at least he didn't obstruct an elite Uchiha's path, so why should he care? After class, those who were still interested in Uzumaki made the decision to try to corner him and find out what had happened. In an attempt to find an empty seat, Naruto searched the area and discovered 2. One was next to Sakura, and Naruto had to force himself not to throw up, saying, "How the hell did I find her attractive, ugh." Another was next to a certain Hyuga heiress, who was staring at him as if he would vanish and remain dead if she took her eyes off of him for even a moment. Naruto smiled a little because he had matured during the year he was away and was less gullible about falling in love. He always ended up flinching when he realized how unaware he was of the girl's huge crush on him, even though he was able to determine someone's feelings throughout the trip. To make up for all the times he missed the girl's advances and blushing moments, he made the decision to be kinder to her and genuinely get to know her better as soon as he returned. "Hey, your name's Hinata, isn't it?" he asked, knowing the answer, and he chose to sit down next to her. "And Naruto is sit. T. Ting right N. Next to me and T. Ta. Talking to me," she said, her face instantly covered in crimson blush as she nodded slowly, as if her mind was trying to process what was happening. Then, tears began to fall down her cheeks with the words, "He's alive, he's really alive," she said to herself. Damn, she must have been hit hard by my supposed death. If the huge crush she had on me were anything to go by, Naruto thought, reaching up to her cheek and wiping away the tears. "Shush, it's all right. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere," he whispered to her in an attempt to console her. Fortunately, they were in the back of the class, so either no one heard or saw what was happening, or they simply didn't care. For those who did, however, a tiny smile appeared on their faces upon learning of the girl's crush. The onlookers thought, could it be he's finally figured out the girl's feelings towards him? Even though the blonde's actions were what truly startled them. Damn, I forgot how boring class can be. At least I only have to deal with it for a week, then I'll be an actual ninja, Naruto said as the class started. Iruka then went into another of his lectures, something about the past Hokages or something similar. Naruto was already fighting off falling asleep in the first 10 minutes of class. Hours later, when class had finally ended and the students were beginning to leave for the unknown, Naruto grabbed Hinata's wrist to stop her from leaving. He said, "Hey Hinata, you want to go get some ramen? It's been ages since I've had Ichiraku's." Did Naruto just ask me out on a date? Hinata asked herself, her face still flushed. Why? Yes. The two then left the classroom to go to Ichiraku's. Ichiraku's Ramen Tuchi and Ayame both yelled, "Naruto," upon seeing their favorite customer return and placing an order for his preferred dish. Since Naruto's survival hasn't yet been made public, the majority of people were still shocked to see him. Tuchi cried out, "We thought you had died," and Naruto merely grinned back at the elderly man, saying, It'll take more than that to take me out, Dadbeo." "Naruto, I'm so glad you're alive." It's alright, Ayame. Nay. "Chan. Not even death will keep me away from here." Naruto laughed, receiving a hearty laugh in return from Tuchi. Ayame then hurried around the booth to embrace the young blonde who has always been like a younger brother to her. After witnessing Naruto's cordial welcome from the father-daughter duo, Hinata grinned a little. Even though it's not by blood, this must be Naruto's family, she thought to herself. At the mention of their date, Hinata's face lit up even more red than all the others she's had today. Naruto's face turned into a grin, wrapped an arm around Hinata's shoulder, and pulled her closer to himself, saying, "This here's Hinata Hyuga, and she's in the same class as me." As if finally spotting the company that Naruto brought, both of them got a sly smirk on their faces before Ayame decided to tease the two, "So who's your date, Naruto?" After the additional contact, Hinata finally appeared to have consumed too much and appeared to be on the verge of fainting. Naruto said, "Oops, I think I went too far," as everyone stared at the girl. Tucci and Ayame laughed at the two of them before Tucci invited them to sit down while he brought out the usual. After the meal was served and consumed, Naruto and Hinata said their goodbyes and Naruto began to walk Hinata to the Hyuga compound. Outside the Hyuga compound, "Well, here we are, Hinata. I guess I'll see you tomorrow in class," Naruto said as he was about to leave. "Wait," Hinata exclaimed, startling him because he had never heard her raise her voice before. Then, turning around, Hinata continued with what she was going to say, if it's okay with you maybe we can do this again sometime." Hinata closed her eyes, fearing that this would be great. "Maybe we can go somewhere after class tomorrow." Hinata let go of her breath, which she was unaware she was holding, and a radiant smile appeared on her face. "Okay, I would like that," she said without faltering, further startling Naruto, who was stunned into silence by the lovely smile Hinata gave him. Wow, I never knew that Hinata looked so pretty, was the first thing that came to his mind. Hyuga front door. "Thank you, Naruto. With you back, it seems like Hinata will finally rise up from the depression she's been in," Hiyashi said, grinning as he greeted his daughter as Hinata entered the house. "But I fear that the elders won't take kindly to the two of them dating. I will not let them interfere with the two of them though," Hiyashi said to himself, clenching his fist while he watched his daughter ask Naruto out on another date. 1 week Genin exam day. Time skip the academy classroom. A week had gone by since Naruto returned to Konoha, and now that the Genin exam was finally here, he thought about how the date from last night had ended and how he had ended up taking Hinata out on several dates during the week to get to know the Hyuga heiress better, even though it seemed like she was still blushing around him. A flashback in front of the Hyuga compound. After returning to the Hyuga compound, Naruto and Hinata said their goodbyes once more, but this time Naruto chose to take a chance. Naruto and Hinata had just finished their date for the day, which had involved a small picnic atop the Hokage monument, which they both really enjoyed because it allowed them to unwind and spend time together without having to deal with the glares and whispers directed at him. Hinata was about to enter the compound's gate when Naruto abruptly turned her around. To her surprise and delight, Naruto and her were now kissing, as he had smashed his lips against hers as soon as he had done so, both as a good luck charm and to try to start a relationship. Naruto eventually withdrew, his cheeks a little flushed, and he was grinning broadly. "Good luck with the exams tomorrow, Hinata, and maybe once we both become genin we can talk about how things are going to be between us, because well I like you and I know you like me," he said, still grinning. Naruto turned to go back to his apartment, but Hinata was completely flushed, and she began to walk through the gate and through the estate until she arrived at her room, as if she were following instructions. As soon as Hinata's door was closed and she was in her room, she jumped onto her bed and buried her head in her pillow, squealing as she thought about what had just happened minutes earlier. "And then Naruto kissed me in he said he likes me. I'll definitely pass the exams, I won't disappoint Naruto," she thought resolutely. And then we will be. Hinata never got a chance to finish the thought, though, as she passed out from the overheated, full-blown blush that was still not going away. At least she doesn't have to worry about not falling asleep. Finish the flashback. Hinata was adamant about passing the test and getting together with the person she had been crushing on for years. She would not let anything stop her from succeeding. Naruto, on the other hand, was at a loss for what to do, thinking, well, I could always aim for perfect scores and show everyone that I'm not the same Dobi that they used to know, but that might bring about unwanted attention. Then I could always try to pass with barely passing marks and keep up the Dobi appearance, but then no one would probably take me seriously. I suppose I could try to go for the middle lane and try to get average marks, making people take me seriously while not gaining too much attention. All right, class, today, as you are all aware, we have been anticipating his genin exams. First, there will be a genjutsu exam. You and your partner will be paired up, and you will cast a genjutsu on each other while your partner tries to break free from the genjutsu. After that, you and your partner will switch roles. The taijutsu exam comes after the genjutsu exam. The first part of the exam will involve target practice using practice dummies with kunais and shurikens, followed by a sparring session with the same individuals you practiced with for the genjutsu exam. Lastly, a kawarimi, henge, and bunshin jutsu will be included in the ninjutsu exam. I was attempting to create tests for each of the three categories. Iruka then began listing people as partners. Hinata was paired with a person whose name he didn't even know, Shikamaru and Choji were paired, and Sakura and Ino were paired. Sakura kept talking about how she would defeat Ino.pig, and then have Sasuke.kun, all to herself, and Ino was sweating the entire time, hoping that she wasn't that bad when she was in her fangirl state of mind. Great, I got the emo jerk, Naruto complained to himself when his name was finally called and he was paired with Sasuke Uchiha. Since Naruto has never been successful, most people didn't think he could even cast a genjutsu, but he was the first of the two to do so. They were shocked to learn that Naruto had successfully used a basic level genjutsu that only rendered him invisible to Sasuke. To his surprise, nothing happened when Sasuke said, "Kai," half-heartedly, expecting the genjutsu to break before his elite self. "Hey, no matter what, you'll always be dead last dobi," Sasuke grinned, thinking it must have been a coincidence. "Kai," Sasuke repeated, putting some effort into it and actually breaking the genjutsu this time. Now, Naruto took great satisfaction in the fact that he was much better at controlling his emotions than he had been a year before, but for some reason, the moment the haughty Uchiha opened his mouth, Naruto felt the impulse to punch him in the face. However, he allowed himself to be content with a tick mark showing up above his eye. Sasuke grinned haughtily and said, "Hey sensei, we shouldn't even bother with the dobi trying to break out of my genjutsu, there's no way he'll be able to." In response to the boy's haughty demeanor, Iruka sighed and said, "Sasuke, everyone gets a chance. TCH, hey dobi, just give up, there's no way a dead last like you could break out of the genjutsu cast by an elite Uchiha like myself," Sasuke said, and you could hear Sakura squealing in the background. "Sasuke's so cool," she said, before turning to Naruto. "Hey Baka, you should do as Sasuke.kun says, you're not worth Sasuke-kun's time." Naruto simply watched with a drop of perspiration. I think I'd like to give it a chance anyway," he said, although the more the conceited brat talked, the more tick marks appeared on his forehead. Naruto was thinking, "Gah, I just want to wipe that arrogant smirk straight out of his face, he's so freaking annoying," when an idea struck and he grinned. "Wow, he's really underestimating me," Sasuke thought as he cast a low-rank genjutsu that was about low genin rank. Naruto calmly said, "Kai," with a smirk, and Sasuke's genjutsu instantly broke apart, giving the impression that Naruto wasn't even struggling, which he wasn't. When his genjutsu was released, Sasuke's smirk vanished in an instant, and he said, Wait, let me try that again, that must have been a fluke." Sakura screamed in the background, "Yeah, the Baka couldn't have broken Sasuke-kun's genjutsu." Iruka started to say that there were no second chances, but Naruto cut him off before he could finish, saying, "Go ahead Iruka. Sensei, let him try again so I can prove to him that it wasn't a fluke." Sasuke immediately regained his smirk after Naruto said, "Hey, looks like the dobi knows how to show respect to his betters," utterly disregarding Naruto's statement that he would demonstrate that it wasn't an anomaly. The Uchiha's remarks caused Naruto's eye to twitch. "So he thinks he's my better, huh? How about I make this one more flashy and humiliating for him then?" he thought, his smirk returning. Then, Sasuke used another genjutsu, this time between mid and high genin rank. "Well, at least he's taking me seriously this time," Naruto said, grinning, and shouted, "Kai," as he poured a ton of chakra into the release. As Naruto looked down on Sasuke with the smirk still on his face, the genjutsu was released in a shockwave of blue chakra, pushing him off his feet and landing him squarely on his ass. Sasuke was glaring up at the dobi and clenching his fists. He considered charging at him to humiliate him, but ultimately decided to humiliate him during the taijutsu sparring test. The people around Sakura held their ears in agony as she screamed, "Baka, what did you do to Sasuke-kun? You must have cheated. There's no way you could have beaten Sasuke.kun." Once more, Naruto's eye was twitching. "Gosh, how in the world did I ever find that Banshee attractive? I wish I could go back in time and give the younger me some common sense because she's so damned annoying. How come the emo and the Banshee seem to irritate me so much?" he asked himself. doubting his sanity in his younger years. He then came up with a plan to silence the banshee, so he smirked and sent out another chakra shockwave that knocked her off her feet. Her shocked expression sent everyone around her into a frenzy. Then Naruto went over to stand next to Hinata, who was trying to contain her laughter by covering her mouth with a hand. He discovered that, while her opponent found it difficult to defeat her genjutsu, she had also been able to do so with ease. Okay class, the genjutsu part of the exam is over now, it's time for the target practice exam, follow me outside to the training ground. After he managed to control the laughter that was trying to overwhelm him, Iruka noticed that everyone else had finished. Once they arrived at the training ground, they began to go in alphabetical order, taking turns at the target practice. After receiving a perfect score, Sasuke smirked and turned his attention to a boy with blonde hair. Naruto rolled his eyes and took his turn, receiving an average score of 7 out of 10. It was now time for the sparring match, which was the next component of the taijutsu exam. The genjutsu pairings were the same as before, with Naruto once more facing the haughty Uchiha, who was still grinning from the target practice. A tick appeared above Naruto's eyebrow as he repeated, "Hey, like I said once, Adobe always Adobe. What is his problem? I mean, I completely humiliated him in the genjutsu exam, so why does he keep thinking he's so freaking superior to me?" he asked. Normally, Iruka would have yelled at the students to stop observing the two boys who were about to fight and to start their own matches, but for the time being, like everyone else, Iruka's attention was entirely focused on the two boys who were about to fight. As a result, the other students had not yet started their own spars. In an attempt to convince the blonde that he would always be nothing in comparison to him, the Uchiha continued to rant, "I'll make you pay for earlier, a dead last like you will never be better than an elite like me." Okay, seriously, is he ever going to shut up or is planning to talk me into submission? Although that does sound nice if it at least makes him shut up, Naruto thought angrily as the haughty boy continued to rant about how he's king of the world or something. Sasuke grinned and said, "Hey, I've seen you hanging out with that Hyuga girl, who also happens to be an elite unlike you. Maybe I should take her from you and show her how it is to be with a real elite as my mistress for when I rebuild my clan." Everyone was shocked by what the Uchiha had just said, with the exception of Sakura, who responded, "Yeah, Sasuke-kun, that girl can be our little slave." Snap. When the snap was heard, everyone's attention was diverted from the Uchiha to Naruto, who was standing next to him with his right hand holding his face and his left foot forward. The only person who didn't move was Sasuke-kun, who kept her gaze fixed on him. "Kya, Naruto. Baka, let go of Sasuke right now." With a voice that sent shivers down everyone's spine, Naruto said, "You've gone too far this time." Then, with a heave, he slammed the back of Sasuke's head into the ground, instantly knocking him out cold. Everyone watched in disbelief as the supposedly dead last defeated the elite Uchiha in a single move with little to no effort. When he finally noticed that everyone else had not yet begun their matches, he thought, what the hell was with that speed? That's at least low-mid Chunin level speed, not believing his eyes. "Naruto, what kind of training did you go through?" He was about to yell at everyone to stop gawking and start their matches when he was interrupted by a shriek that shouldn't have been humanly possible. The pink banshee yelled, "Naruto! Baka, what do you think you are doing to Sasuke? He's an elite Uchiha, you have no right to harm your betters. You better bow down and beg for his forgiveness, you dead last," to the boy, who was bored and staring at her. He asked, "You done yet?" Sakura then screamed again and charged directly at Naruto, raising an eyebrow at her behavior. "Does she really think she can hurt me?" he asked. Sakura swung at Naruto, but he vanished after giving her a lightning fast chop to the back of her neck, rendering her unconscious without even attempting to catch her. He then turned to face Ino, with whom she was meant to spar, and said, "Sorry Ino, looks like I left you without a sparring partner." "No, it's fine, she charged at you so it's not your fault anyway," Ino said, blushing. Naruto smiled at her response, which caused her to blush again. "Looks like she's changed for the better since I've been gone," he said, looking at Iruka out of the corner of his eye. "If it's okay with you and Iruka Sensei, I could fill in as your partner if you want me to," he asked, looking at Iruka. He simply said, "If it's okay with Ino then I will allow it," before turning back to face Ino, who nodded in agreement. "Alright, the taijutsu part of the exam is over now, all that's left is the ninjutsu part, so line up and when it's your turn you will perform the kawarimi, henge, and bunshin jutsu in that order," Iruka said after the spar was over, with Naruto essentially just dodging her attacks while remarking on the hole in her guard. Naruto grinned kindly and said, "Nice job Ino, with a little refinement you would be a fine kunoichi," before moving to the line without observing the blush that had appeared on her face. Even though it feels good to be recognized for the effort I put into honing my skills, she asked herself, why am I blushing so much? It's Naruto. After overcoming her fangirl mindset, Ino began to focus more on honing her ninja abilities in an effort to become a kunoichi of Konoha rather than a mindless follower. Her father was therefore pleased with his daughter's determination, especially when she approached him for assistance in her training and began to take her clan jutsu training more seriously. However, he was most pleased that she had stopped starving herself and was no longer following her diet. Similar to the target practice exam, the students were arranged in a line with Naruto near the end. The line had been rearranged into alphabetical order. Smelling salts, which were always carried around during exams in case someone was knocked unconscious like Sakura and Sasuke had been, were used to wake them up. Fortunately for the blonde, neither of them had said anything yet and had just continued to glare at the blonde boy who had initially rendered them unconscious. Following Sasuke's turn, in which he received yet another high score, he appeared to be glaring at the blonde whose turn it was now, rather than the familiar smirk that usually follows. Naruto returned to his average score plan after deciding he had already stood out too much. It was now time for the Bunshin after he had performed an ordinary Kawamire and Henge, in which he had to change into Iruka sensei. He was about to execute a mediocre Bunshin after gathering the chakra when he experienced a feeling that he was well accustomed to. He had a feeling that told him to fail the Bunshin. Normally, no one would follow such a feeling. However, Riku sensei had told Naruto to always follow the feeling if it ever materialized, which he has done each time he has experienced it. A flashback. The idea of learning a new skill caught Naruto's attention. Naruto, I will now tell you one of the most important abilities that all Keyblade bearers end up with, Riku said. When Riku saw Naruto's bewildered expression, he chose to use an example. All Keyblade wielders end up with what you could call a sixth sense, you could call it a reaction. The reaction is basically a highly tuned form of instinct. The reaction is when a person gets a strong feeling of what they should do next, Riku said. With a nod, he went on, Naruto, have you noticed how even though you've never wielded a sword before, you are able to fight like that of a master swordsman? That is basically a lesser form of the reaction sense. What is happening is that your body is instantly reacting to the situation you are in and inputs information into your body what to do. For sword battle, it tells your body how to swing and when to block. For example, the combos you pull off are a series of reactions that tell your body how to combine a series of attacks to inflict damage on your opponent. However, there are instances in which the emotion may not be related to combat. For example, if you are given two options, your reaction sense may tell you which one to choose. Riku clarified this in the hopes that he fully understood the significance. Naruto attempted to summarize what his sensei had said. I think I understand, so what you mean in this reaction is basically your instinct telling you what to do in any given situation that may lead to a favorable outcome, he said. Riku, pleased that the blonde had realized the significance of the reaction, nodded, saying, remember Naruto, if you ever feel a reaction coming, follow it. Do not question it, for it will always save you and bring you to a favorable outcome. Finish the flashback. Thus, believing the reaction completely, Naruto pumped too much chakra into the Bunshin jutsu. Then, with a poof, a failure of a Bunshin emerged through a puff of smoke that resembled a boneless blob. Naruto rubbed the back of his head and said, Hehe, sorry sensei, seems like the Bunshin jutsu is still too much for me, with a sheepish expression. Iruka sighed, damn, and he was doing so well too, but the ninjutsu exam is something you must pass unlike the other two. He turned to face the blonde and said solemnly, I'm sorry Naruto, but if you can't perform a successful Bunshin jutsu then I'm going to have to fail you. Hehe, it's okay Iruka sensei, I guess it was too soon for me to try the genin exam, I mean I have been gone for a year now, Naruto said before returning to the classroom with the rest of the group. Iruka then declared that everyone had passed, with the exception of Naruto, and that they were expected to return the following week for team assignment. Naruto was the first to leave the class after he finished, leaving Hinata with no time to try to console her crush. I hope Naruto will be okay, she thought to herself, her face worried. On the swing outside the classroom where he was after failing the cannon. At the moment, Naruto was seated on the swing outside the classroom, which was always his little haven where he could think quietly and unhindered. While he ignored the obvious looks and whispers coming from the parents of the students who did pass, he was currently thinking about the response he had in class. With complete faith in the reaction, Naruto thought to himself, now I just have to wait and see why the reaction wanted me to purposely fail. He wasn't even concerned about failing. The other Chunin who was helping Iruka Sensei approached Naruto as if to respond to his query. Naruto, he called, grabbing the boy's attention. Mizuki. Sensei, Naruto said, raising an eyebrow. As he put his plan into action, Mizuki smirked inwardly and said, "Hey Naruto, I know that Iruka may have failed you, but what if I told you a little secret about how you could pass?" In an attempt to determine where this might be going, Naruto asked, "Why would you tell me the secret?" "Well, since you were doing so well in all the other exams and only failed the Bunshin exam, I believe you deserve another chance," was the reply he got. In an attempt to comprehend what Mizuki might be planning, he thought, "TCH, yeah right, like you would think I deserved another chance. He looks at me just like all the other villagers, although he does hide it better than them. All you have to do is successfully take the forbidden scroll to this location and learn at least one jutsu from it and then you pass," Mizuki said, handing Naruto a slip of paper. He then turned and walked away, grinning as he considered how gullible the demon brat was. Mizuki left with just one word on his mind, but he failed to notice a smirk on Naruto's own face. Jackpot. The office of the Hokage Hiruzen was once more up against the paperwork that all cages dreaded. After glancing at the mountains of paperwork that still needed to be finished, Hiruzen sighed, "Why can't something come up to save me from all this damn paperwork?" Naruto unexpectedly stormed into his office, giving the impression that his request was about to be fulfilled. Hiruzen asked, "Naruto, what are you doing here so late at night?" Because the sun had already set and it was indeed late. "Hokage Sama," Naruto said, immediately grabbing his attention because Naruto would typically refer to him as Jiji. "There is a traitor in Konoha." Hiruzen's eyes widened and then instantly became serious. Traitors were a serious problem that needed to be resolved right away before any village secrets could be disclosed. "Naruto, who is the traitor, and do you have any proof?" the Hokage asked. In response to the Hokage's initial question, Naruto said, "The traitor is a chunin named Mizuki. He currently assists Iruka Sensei at the academy. Currently I have no proof, but I have information on what he plans to do." Hiruzen gestured for Naruto to go on and share what he knew. "Mizuki planned to trick me into stealing the forbidden scroll of sealing and bring it to him," Naruto replied. The Hokage's eyes grew wide at the implications of his statement. The idea that he would attempt to enlist Naruto in his plot to steal the forbidden scroll of all things is more serious than I initially believed. Who knows what would have happened if that had ended up in the hands of the enemy, Hiruzen thought, as he was currently attempting to find a way to capture Mizuki. Hiruzen thought, "The problem is, there's no proof and I highly doubt the council will take Naruto's word over anyone else's," but Naruto later made the decision to tell him about his own scheme. "Jiji, I say that I go along with Mizuki's plan and bring the scroll to the designated location where I will then capture him with proof," said Naruto, to which Hiruzen immediately attempted to deny. "Naruto, I'm glad you wish to try to capture the traitor, but he's a chunin while you're not even a genin yet. I'm stronger than you think. I assure you that I can handle him. Here, how about this, Jiji? If I perform a jutsu that can knock you out, we go along with my plan," Naruto replied with a jutsu in mind. "Naruto, I highly doubt you will be able to knock me out, but go ahead, but once you fail you must throw away your plan to try to confront him yourself," Hiruzen said, confident that nothing Naruto could do would knock him out. "Alright Jiji, but don't hold this against me, you brought it upon yourself," Naruto said before making a hand sign and being engulfed in smoke. "A henge, surely he doesn't think that will do anything to me." Hiruzen could only speculate. "Oiroke no jutsu." Then the smoke cleared, revealing a busty blonde with hair tied up in twin tails, barely maintaining her modesty. "Ah, I still remember Riku Sensei's reaction to that jutsu, still can't believe he shot that far back from a nosebleed." Naruto had initially developed this jutsu to play a practical joke on Riku because he always seemed to be cool under pressure and nothing ever seemed to affect him. However, that changed after Naruto revealed his newest jutsu. After a while of searching, Naruto eventually found the scroll he was looking for, saying, "Alright, I got it, now I just need to set the trap and catch the traitor." Hiruzen was then knocked unconscious by a huge nosebleed that sent him flying backwards out of his seat. "Sorry about that Jiji," Naruto said before moving toward a shelf filled with many scrolls. The forest that envelops Konoha, Naruto thought to himself, "Well, now that I'm where he wanted me to be, I just gotta wait for him to show up. I've got a scroll here filled with powerful jutsus and time to kill." He then opened the scroll and quickly skimmed the description and the names of the jutsus. Before focusing on one jutsu in particular, Naruto thought, most of these seem either too dangerous or just don't fit with my style. Wait, what do we have here? Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Now why would this be here? Here we go, equally distributes chakra between the clones, and it's a solid body clone. Yet it doesn't explain why it's in the scroll. Sure, it can be dangerous, but not enough to be a kinjutsu. Oh wait, here we are. Wow, that explains it. This is actually perfect for someone like me. In order to kill time while he waited for Mizuki to come and fall for his trap, Naruto had chosen which jutsu he would learn. The house of Iruka was thinking about the night the Kyuubi attacked Konoha, the night he lost his parents and became an orphan like Naruto, when he was startled out of his reverie by a knock on his door. When Iruka answered the door, Mizuki, his assistant, was standing behind it. "Iruka, we must go to the Hokage's office. Naruto has taken the forbidden scroll of sealing as a prank." Iruka was taken aback. He couldn't believe Naruto would do something so stupid that could be interpreted as treachery. After seeing a group of irate ninja, Iruka and Mizuki went to the Hokage's office and stopped outside. There, they witnessed the Hokage saying to the ninja, "Naruto has indeed stolen the forbidden scroll of sealing. Find Naruto. And do not let the scroll enter into the wrong hands." After that, all of the ninja dispersed into various locations in an attempt to locate the boy. There now Mizuki is heading towards Naruto. "I leave the rest to you. Be safe." Iruka then made her way to the woods in the hopes of finding Naruto, while Mizuki chose to spread the word and then pretend that Naruto had fled with the scroll. The forest outside of Konoha. "I guess it's been reported that I've taken the scroll, but how the hell did Iruka Sensei find me? Shit, this could ruin the plan," said Naruto, who had long since mastered the jutsu and was waiting for Mizuki when he sensed a familiar chakra signature approaching. Iruka raised an eyebrow at Naruto's response before hearing the sound of something piercing the air. Iruka was about to push Naruto out of the way, but instead he felt himself being pulled along with Naruto as he appeared in front of the boy. "Ha, I found you," Iruka said when he appeared in front of the boy. "Iruka, now's not the time, get ready." W. What do you mean, Mizuki? Sensei, W. Why did you attack Iruka? Sensei. Naruto chose to play along for a little longer as the dobi in the hopes that Mizuki would reveal his plans to both him and Iruka, providing him with sufficient evidence. "Impressive dodge," the attacker said, identifying himself. "Naruto, give me the scroll." Iruka glared at Mizuki and said, "Don't give him the scroll," adding, "That scroll is full of dangerous jutsus. Mizuki used you to acquire it." "Good job, Iruka." "Sensei, now I don't have to worry about him trying to figure out what's going on," Naruto thought, turning back to Mizuki. "Naruto, there's no point in you having it," Mizuki said, smirking. "How about I tell you the truth?" Iruka's eyes widened at what Mizuki was about to reveal to the young blonde. "Do you remember how the Yondaime Hokage defeated the Kyuubi 12 years ago?" Mizuki questioned. "Kyuubi? Why is he bringing up the Kyuubi now of all times?" "Well, since that day a law was made by the Sandaime Hokage, a law centered around the Kyuubi," Mizuki said with a maniacal grin. "The law states that the truth of that night 12 years ago was to never be revealed to the younger generation, but this law was to keep the truth from you. The truth is, even though the Yondaime was powerful, he could not defeat the Kyuubi," Mizuki said with glee, taking sick amusement in how he was about to ruin the boy. "But wait, couldn't be defeated then? What happened? Why did the attack stop?" Naruto's frustrated thoughts were, what the hell is he going on about? Why would there be a law to keep the truth from me? Mizuki nearly revealed the most closely guarded secret in Konoha when he said, instead the Yondaime Hokage had to seal the Kyuubi into an infant. Sealed in an infant. Wait, he couldn't mean. But then all those glares and that night, it's all starting to make sense. Mizuki yelled the final line. "The Kyuubi was sealed into you. Naruto Uzumaki. You are the Kyuubi." Naruto was trembling, giving the impression that he was trembling with fear or disbelief, but in reality, he was trembling with pure rage. "How dare they? The reason they hate me is because the Kyuubi is sealed inside of me. Don't they know that doesn't make me the Kyuubi but the seal that holds it back from killing all of them? How dare they?" Mizuki was taken aback when Naruto yelled, "Hey moron," assuming the boy was attempting to avoid being called as such. "Don't you know the difference between a kunai and the scroll it's sealed in? How the hell are you even a chunin if you can't even figure that out?" While Mizuki was incensed, saying, "How dare this demon insult and humiliate me? I'll make him pay," Iruka was proud of Naruto for not allowing the truth to break him and send him into a depressive spiral. Iruka was about to yell Naruto's name and position himself between the shuriken and his pupil when Mizuki threw the Fuma shuriken off his back. However, he was caught off guard when Naruto quickly twisted his body to the side, avoiding the enormous shuriken with little effort. Naruto calmly asked, "Is that all you got? If so, I restate what I said earlier. How the hell are you a chunin?" Which infuriated Mizuki even more. Then Mizuki charged at Naruto, ready to strike him in the side of the head, but Naruto again sidestepped it in an instant, and Mizuki's fist struck nothing but air. As if to emphasize the obvious, Naruto remarked, "You really are slow, you know that. Let me try now." Following his instructions, Naruto took his turn, which was actually a straight punch that struck Mizuki in the middle of the chest, sending him flying back and colliding with a tree trunk. "Don't tell me that's all you could take," Naruto said, feeling a little let down and expecting more of a challenge. Mizuki then got back up while glaring at the boy who appeared to be making fun of him, saying, "I will never let a demon like you defeat me." As Mizuki finished speaking, he charged back at Naruto, who merely shook his head and sighed, "How predictable, maybe I should test that new jutsu of mine." The irony to defeat him with the jutsu that he indirectly allowed me to learn. Then Naruto made an odd hand gesture, Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, with the middle and index fingers of both hands forming a cross. This caused a tremendous amount of smoke to fill the clearing. Iruka and Mizuki both went wide-eyed and slack-jawed as soon as the smoke cleared. The clearing was now full of hundreds of Naruto, all of whom were grinning somewhat sadistically at Mizuki. At that moment, Mizuki's only thought was, "Oh shit." All of the Naruto yelled, "Hey Mizuki! Teme, no matter how much damage you can do, I will always deal you the same damage 1,000-fold," before lunging towards Mizuki. To put it succinctly, the fight could be summed up as a massacre because Mizuki was severely beaten by every Naruto, leaving him with black and blue bruises and bumps all over his body. The office of the Hokage. Impressive Naruto, not only did you learn a technique that is easily Junin level, but you could create so many clones. Then again, you are an Uzumaki. Hiruzen had been observing the fight between Naruto and Mizuki for a considerable amount of time. Hokage. Sama, we have found the boy. We are about to go and retrieve both the boy and the scroll. Don't, Hiruzen said, startling the Anbu. The problem has been solved and Naruto will soon be returning with the scroll. Guide him to my office. Then, the Anbu disappeared, going in the direction of the boy to deliver him to the Hokage as directed. A forest outside of Konoha. Hey, amazing Naruto, you never cease to impress me, to create so many clones, all of them solid no less. Iruka was staring at his favorite student as he grabbed the scroll and Mizuki and brought them both over to Iruka. Iruka then began to recall how Naruto would always say that he would become Hokage and surpass all the previous Hokages, saying, "Hey Naruto, come over here, I want to give you something." "Close your eyes," Naruto said, setting down the scroll and Mizuki. "Close your eyes," he said, and Naruto did just that. "Okay, you can open your eyes now." Naruto opened his eyes to see Iruka's face, but this time he noticed something different. Iruka no longer had the customary headband that was always on his forehead. Naruto then brought a hand up to his forehead to feel the cold metal of a headband. "Thank you, Iruka. Sensei," Naruto said, trying to contain his tears as he rushed to embrace Iruka. "Alright Naruto, let's head back. I'm sure Hokage Sama is worried, also we need to return the scroll and bring in Mizuki," Iruka said, looking at the traitor and the scroll. Naruto was about to cry because, despite his tendency to be laid back, he did wish for a family, to which Iruka appeared to fill the gap. Konoha gates. As they were entering Konoha through the gates, Naruto and Iruka were stopped by an Anbu. Iruka was about to reveal the truth when the Anbu said, "Naruto, Iruka, you are both to head towards the Hokage's office while I bring the traitor to the I&T." After that, Iruka gave Mizuki to the Anbu, and he and Naruto made their way directly to the Hokage's office. The office of the Hokage. Iruka was shocked to learn that Naruto had completed an A-rank mission, and Naruto raised an eyebrow, saying, "Must be a cover-up." Naruto and Iruka then entered the Hokage's office, where the Hokage was standing directly in front of them from behind his desk, saying, "Congratulations, Naruto, for both graduating and completing your first A-rank mission." In an attempt to understand what the devil was going on, Iruka asked, "Hokage Sama, what do you mean by A-rank mission?" Naruto was given an A-rank mission to act as bait along with the Forbidden Scroll of Sealing to apprehend the traitor Mizuki along with finding proof of his actions to present to the council, Hiruzen said, preparing a pretext. "Now Naruto, if you would return the scroll to me," Hiruzen said, "and please fill a report of your mission and I will then give you the reward for an A-rank mission." "Sure Gigi, but there's something I need to talk to you about," he said, looking at Iruka. "Sorry sensei, but I need to talk to him alone." Iruka was even more shocked, asking when this happened. Naruto was under orders to take the scroll, and he already knew about Mizuki. Iruka knew right away what he wanted to talk about with the Hokage. He must want to talk about the Kyuubi. Iruka nodded to Naruto and the Hokage before leaving the room, saying, "Okay Gigi, I already know you were watching me so you must know what I'm going to talk to you about." Hiruzen sighed. He had always dreaded having to explain the Kyuubi to Naruto, even though he had assumed Naruto would be older by the time he did. Hiruzen essentially reiterated what Mizuki had told him, with the exception of the fact that he was the demon. "Well, as I'm sure you already know, even though the Yondaime was powerful he could not defeat the Kyuubi, so he instead had to seal inside of an infant. That infant was you, Naruto, he said. You know I'm trying to figure out how I didn't figure that out. I mean my birthday is on the same freaking day the Kyuubi attacked. Then there's the glares, and also the night 1 year ago, Naruto said, making the Hokage sad as he heard about his ordeal. Naruto said, okay Gigi, no more secrets, tell me who my parents are, hoping to dispel all the secrets. It seems like a lot of secrets will be revealed tonight. Hiruzen sighed once more. All right, Naruto, I'll tell you, but listen and don't interrupt me until I'm done, Hiruzen said. I'll start off with you father I guess and get that out of the way. Naruto, your father is the Yondaime Hokage, Minato Namikaze, Hiruzen said, to which Naruto's eyes widened. Your father truly loved you Naruto, and he would always regret how he had to seal the Kyuubi into you, but he had no other choice. I apologize for not revealing your father's identity, but you see that your father had made a lot of enemies, particularly from Iwa, who would undoubtedly try to kill the son of the Yellow Flash. Naruto nodded in comprehension. A ninja like the Yondaime Hokage would undoubtedly make a lot of enemies. In fact, in Iwa alone, he had used the Hiraishin no Jutsu to defeat an entire army, earning the moniker the Yellow Flash. Hiruzen laughed to himself as he recalled the redhead's childhood antics and said, your mother's name was Kushina Uzumaki, she was actually much like you are, always shouting to everyone how she would be the first female Hokage. She's actually the last Uzumaki from a hidden village named Uzushiogakure. She later became the Kyuubi's second container after another Uzumaki named Mito Uzumaki, the wife of the Shodem Hokage, the Hokage revealed, indicating that Naruto was not the first container of the Kyuubi. Naruto asked, startling Hiruzen, so you're saying my mother was a Jinchuriki before me? Naruto, how do you know about Jinchurikis? He asked, curious as to how the boy had come up with the term. Gigi, I've been away for a year. I ended up learning several things while I was away, he said, and the Hokage gave him a sympathetic look. I guess being away for a year would allow Naruto to learn of several things. In any case, your parents had to conceal their relationship out of fear that Kushina would attack them in retaliation for Minato, the elderly man said, receiving a sympathetic glance from Naruto. That implies that they also had to conceal your birth. Hiruzen explained how the Kyuubi even ended up attacking the village. Naruto, you see during childbirth a Jinchuriki's seal becomes fragile, and while I do not know what happened during your birth I do know that the Kyuubi ended up being released and attacked the village, Hiruzen said. As Naruto struggled to process what had been revealed to him, that he was not only the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi but also the son of the Yondaime Hokage. The Hokage noticed that Naruto appeared to be under a lot of stress and decided to change the subject to something more lighthearted, which actually caused him to laugh pervertedly. Hiruzen said, hey Naruto, as you know you were the last member of both the Namikaze and the Uzumaki clan. Naruto raised an eyebrow, wondering what the Hokage was trying to say. Well, since you were the last of both clans you end up falling under the CRA. That cunning perverted old man, the blonde thought as Naruto instantly went pale. Most men would be overjoyed to hear such news, but Naruto had no intention of dating more than one woman. In fact, he was currently attempting to learn more about Hinata and perhaps even begin a romantic relationship with her. After his thoughts turned to the girl he had kissed just a few days prior, Naruto thought, Hinata. Oh shit, how will she take this? As all of this was going on, Hiruzen was laughing to himself. He thought, hey, I wonder what kind of harem Naruto will have, and let out another perverted laugh as he watched the emotional display that was constantly playing over Naruto's face. However, Hiruzen knew there was more to discuss, so he collected himself and resumed his serious demeanor prior to bringing up the CRA. Hiruzen wished to ease his surrogate grandson's burden by providing him with what is rightfully his. Naruto, now that you know who your parents are, I plan to announce your heritage to the rest of the village if you end up entering the Chunin exams in a couple months' time, he said. After nodding in agreement with the Hokage's statement, Naruto handed the scroll to Hiruzen and filled out the report before receiving the reward for the A-rank mission. Alright Gigi, I think I'm going to go ahead and do this report now so I can head home and sleep, Naruto said. After a long night, Naruto went home to rest since he had finished everything and had nothing else to do. Time skip. The apartment of Naruto. A few days had passed since Naruto defeated Mizuki and turned into a Konoha ninja. In the interim, Naruto met Konohamaru, the Hokage's grandson, and Ebisu, his private tutor. The boy eventually learned how to use the Oiroke no Jutsu from Naruto, who somehow became Konohamaru's boss. Additionally, he developed a different jutsu known as Harem no Jutsu, which he used to send Ebisu flying after a severe nosebleed. After a restful night's sleep, Naruto was currently waking up and getting ready for class today. Since today was the day that all of the new genin of Konoha would be divided into teams of 3, Naruto pondered, I wonder who my teammates are going to be. He hoped to be paired with Hinata. Time skip. The academy classroom. As Naruto entered the classroom, he saw all of his former classmates who had turned into genin. Naruto eventually located Hinata while searching for a specific person, and he proceeded to sit next to her before being stopped by a certain duck-butted Uchiha. Uchiha said, "Dobi, what are you doing here? Only those who passed are supposed to be here," in an attempt to make up for all the embarrassment he had endured during the test. "Hey duck butt, can't you see the Hite.8, was his sole response as he passed the brooder who was staring at him. He kept moving until he was beside Hinata, who appeared to be lost in her own thoughts because she didn't even acknowledge his presence. He called out, "Hey Hinata," attracting the girl's attention. She looked up at him in astonishment and apparent relief, and then said, "NN Naruto, I thought why. You failed." He grinned and received a smile in return. "Yeah, I did, but I was given a second chance seeing how I did so well on all the other tests," he said. She said without stuttering, "That's great Naruto," expressing how thrilled she was to be able to graduate with her crush and possibly soon be boyfriend. He said, I hope we end up on the same team," and the Hyuga heiress gave him a timid nod in return. While waiting for class to begin, Naruto ended up chatting with Hinata and greeting a few of his friends. After a short while, Iruka entered the classroom and said, "Okay class, starting today you are all finally real shinobi of the village, although you are all currently genin." Iruka then began to ramble on about how each genin would be placed in a team with two other genin and receive instructions from a junin instructor that they would have to obey. Different students had different ideas when they learned that they would be on a three-man team. Naruto thought that he wanted to be on a team with Hinata, and the fangirls all wanted to be paired with a certain duck-butt, who believed that being on a team would bring him down. "Alright, I will now designate who will be on what team and who your junin instructor will be," Iruka replied. "Alright, next is Team 7, Naruto Uzumaki, Sakura Haruno," Iruka said after naming the first 6 teams, none of which Naruto knew the names of. Thump was heard as Naruto slammed his head against his desk, and a screech could be heard from his teammate, and Sasuke Uchiha. Sakura responded to the final name in a variety of ways. While the other fangirls were complaining about not being paired with their precious Uchiha, Sakura was cheering and gloating. At the moment, Sasuke was glaring at Naruto, who was repeatedly hitting his head on his desk and wondering why he was receiving this harsh and peculiar punishment. Naruto's current thoughts were, "This must be some sort of payback. Is it because I used the Oiroke no Jutsu on Gigi, or perhaps because I taught his grandson the jutsu?" Hinata, Shino, and Kiba made up Team 8, while Ino, Shikamaru, and Choji, the offspring of the original Ino, Shika, Cho, made up Team 10. Iruka dismissed the class. "This afternoon we'll introduce you to your junin. Sensei, so until take a break," she said. Time skip. Sakura became irate and yelled, "He's late, because they're junin. Sensei was currently 3 hours behind schedule." Sasuke tried to hide his annoyance by maintaining his composure. "There is only one junin who's ever this late, maybe this will make up for who I'm paired with," Naruto said, smiling maniacally for some reason. The other two seemed to be even more irritated because Naruto was ecstatic to learn who his sensei was and was not at all irritated at the moment. Sakura demanded to know why her teammate was so happy about their sensei's tardiness. "Naruto. Baka, why are you so happy?" she asked. Taking a cue from their soon-to-be sensei, Naruto chose to irritate the girl even more by saying, You say something." Sakura used to just look irritated, but now she appeared as though she wanted to punch someone, either Naruto or their sensei, who isn't there right now. Naruto made the decision to use this opportunity to pull a practical joke, which included a tripwire, a spring, loaded kunai, and a device that resembled a slingshot and was filled with water balloons. They waited for a few minutes before their sensei opened the door and broke the wire that was fastened to it. After he opened the door, their sensei watched with interest as a kunai was released. However, after it was launched, it struck and severed another wire, this time containing a slingshot full of water balloons. However, this caused their sensei to raise the one visible eyebrow. "Weird, no matter how I look at it, the balloons won't hit me," he thought. The slingshot unleashed a barrage of balloons on Naruto's other teammates after he realized the balloons weren't really directed at him. "Oops, seems my aim was off," was Naruto's only comment as he watched with an innocent expression. Sasuke and Sakura appeared to be debating which of the two to vent their rage on, but Kakashi had other ideas. "Well, you two dry off, then meet me and Naruto on the roof," he said, laughing. How can I say this? My first impression is, well, one of you has a good sense of humor while the other two," he said in the first part, glancing at Naruto before turning to face the soaking duo. "Roof of Academy. Well, Let's start with introductions, Kakashi said, observing that Naruto's now dry teammates had just arrived at the roof after drying themselves. What do you want to know? Sakura asked. How about your likes, dislikes, your dreams, and your hobbies? Kakashi replied. Why don't you start with yourself first? Sakura asked. Okay then, my likes and dislikes are none of your business, my dreams, and I have a lot of hobbies, he said, receiving a sweat drop in return. Sakura and Sasuke thought something along the lines of, he only told us his name, while Naruto was struggling to contain his laughter. With Sakura receiving a tick mark for the moniker, Kakashi said, So Pinky, why don't you go now? My name is Haruno Sakura. The things I like. And dreams for the future, she said, blushing as she glanced at Sasuke once more. What I dislike are Naruto, Baka and Ino. Pig, she said, yelling out the final line. Finally my hobbies are, she concluded with one last look at Sasuke. Great a fangirl, she's going to end up a liability most likely, Naruto and Kakashi thought. Okay you next duckbutt, Kakashi said, shifting his attention to said duckbutt. Sasuke received a tick mark but displayed no other emotions, presumably in an attempt to maintain the cool act. My name is Uchiha Sasuke. He gave Naruto a quick glare as he said, I don't really like anything, while I dislike many things. My dream, no, my goal is to restore my clan and kill a certain man, he concluded. So an Avenger, Kakashi thought, echoing Naruto's thoughts. He said, now finally you, the one on the right, as Naruto's teammates failed to notice that Kakashi had not given him a derogatory nickname. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. Ramen and my beloved people are my favorites. I'll keep my dislikes to myself. He said, my dreams are to become Hokage, and finally, I guess my hobbies would be pranks, but he didn't say much. When he mentioned pranks, his teammates glared at him. Kakashi's current thoughts were, he seems mature then from a year ago, except for the pranks, so in the end it's a fangirl, an Avenger, and an enigma. At the moment, Kakashi had no idea how the boy could have changed over the course of the year and seemed to be keeping that information to himself, while the other two essentially stated, or more accurately, demonstrated, what kind of person they are, in Sakura's case. When Kakashi finally managed to clear his mind, he said, okay, that's it for the introductions, by tomorrow we will start our shinobi duties. What will we be doing tomorrow? Asked Naruto, who was genuinely curious about what lay ahead for him. Well, tomorrow we will begin with survival training, he said, capturing the attention of all three of them. This time is different, Kakashi said, this time I will be your opponent. Sakura questioned, why is our first duty training? We've already had enough training at the academy. Naruto could only think, academy training, not something that will last us, he said. He looked at each of them gravely as he said, if you fail though, you will be sent back to the academy. He also mentioned that there was a 66% chance of failing, and if you fail, you will be sent back to the academy. Sakura expressed her reaction, saying, but we already passed the genin exam. That was only to see who had a chance to become a genin. This is the real test though, Kakashi said emotionlessly. While Sasuke was glaring at him and thinking something like, I cannot fail, I am an elite Uchiha, and I will not let anything hold me back from killing him. Naruto, on the other hand, was thinking more analytically, so 66% chance of failure, so 2/3 chance of failing while all of us have a 1/3 chance of passing and there are three of us, I think I see where this is going, but I need more information, something is being left out. He left the three genin alone after saying, oh by the way, I recommend you to skip breakfast otherwise you might throw up, and they all went home to wait for tomorrow, each thinking their own thoughts as they did so. Ground of training Sakura and Sasuke were waiting for their sensei and other teammate at the training ground. They had been supposed to meet up there for 2 hours, but neither had shown up. When one of the two finally arrived after a few more minutes of waiting, Sakura decided to chastise Naruto for being late. Naruto. Baka, you're late. Naruto could only raise an eyebrow and ask, you do know that Kakashi is late for everything by about 3 hours, right? To which both of his teammates twitched their eyebrows and replied, I guess not. Naruto. Baka, Kakashi. Sensei told us not to eat, Sakura said, accusing the boy of disobeying orders. Actually, he didn't, he said. Before Sakura could counter, he recommended us not to eat, he didn't say we weren't supposed to. A minute later, another Naruto arrived with a bowl of ramen in his hands, which was then grabbed by the Naruto who had arrived first. Ah, finally a nice bowl of ramen in the morning. His thoughts were, what just happened? Did I just gain the memory of my clone? I'm going to have checked that out after the test. This might become something extremely useful, as he dispersed his clone and, to his surprise, regained memories of ordering ramen from Ichiraku's. After another hour of waiting, Kakashi finally arrived, and when he saw the trio he was going to test, he said, "Yo." He greeted his students with that one word as though he hadn't just made them wait 3 hours. Well, 2 of them. And even after Naruto arrived, he quickly napped after finishing his bowl of ramen. Returning to his work, Kakashi pulled out an alarm clock and said, "Okay, this is set for noon. Your goal is to take these 2 bells from me before the time's up." The only response he got from one of his students who chose to berate him for being late was, "You're late." He pointed to 3 tree stumps, one of which was where the alarm clock rested. "Those who don't have a bell by noon will be tied to a stump and get no lunch," he said. Guess it's a good thing I did eat," Naruto thought as his teammates glared at him. With a serious expression on his face, Kakashi stated, "All you have to do is take 1 bell, but if you fail to take a bell you will fail and be sent back to the academy." Sakura responded, "But sensei, there's only 2 bells," to which Naruto replied, Yeah, I'm pretty sure he already said that." Sakura appeared to be glaring at Naruto for his jab at her for stating the obvious, but she also appeared to be looking at Sasuke, saying, "This is a test for my love, I will not fail. Exactly, no matter what, one of you fails and will be sent to the academy," he said, looking at his students to see how they were responding. Naruto simply had a smirk on his face, saying, "So that's what was missing, he makes sense now." Sakura responded to Kakashi's statement, "Use anything at your disposal, also come at me with the intent to kill, otherwise you will fail," by asking, "But sensei, what if we hurt you?" Both Naruto and Kakashi could only stare at her as if she were foolish, wondering, did she really just ask that? Naruto said, "Sakura, I think he'll be okay," with a drop of perspiration on the back of his head. After finishing the test, he said, "Begin," and all 3 of the genin vanished from his line of sight. "Stealth is a major ally for any and all shinobi," Kakashi said, glancing around at their hiding place and thinking, well, it looks like they've hid pretty well. Sakura was currently hiding beneath a bush. Sasuke appeared to be perched atop a tree, and Naruto was. Kakashi's only visible eye widened. "What? Where's Naruto? I can't even sense him." Alongside Naruto, "Okay, it's pretty obvious what this test is about. The reason all genin are paired up with 2 others is to accomplish teamwork. This is a test to see if a team can work as a team, hence the 2 bells, a distraction to try to oppose the genin against each other," Naruto thought to himself as he hid in a tree, masking his chakra to the point where it appeared to be non-existent. He already had a hazy understanding that it would be about teamwork, but Kakashi added the 2 bells to make up the missing piece. "I need them to cooperate with me somehow. Since gathering information is the first thing to do in combat, the best course of action would be to confront Kakashi and try to gauge his speed and skill while giving Sakura and Sasuke time to learn about him." After deciding on a plan, he disappeared from his treetop perch and found himself standing in the clearing across from a startled Kakashi. He concealed his surprise by asking, "Why would he reveal himself when I couldn't even find him? What is he up to?" While Kakashi was considering how to respond, Naruto said, Kakashi, before anyone else can get involved, how about you and me have a little spar?" Seeing no issues, he agreed as they both positioned themselves, saying, "Come on Naruto, show me how much you've grown." "Shinobi Fighting Lesson Number 1 Taijutsu," Kakashi said as he and Naruto were assessing each other to see who would strike first. Kakashi had intended to use his priceless book as a kind of disadvantage during the test, but he changed his mind and turned his attention to Naruto, who was currently attempting to determine what level of exposure he should reveal, saying, "Maybe stick with level 1 for now with the skills of a high genin." To start, Naruto made a cross-shaped hand sign while yelling, "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu." With a puff of smoke, there were 6 Narutos instead of 1, shocking Kakashi, who was seen to have a wider than normal lone eye, and asked, "How does he know a Junin level jutsu? Wait, I see the forbidden scroll." 3 Narutos then charged Kakashi, stopping him from thinking further about the situation. 2 of the clones attempted a roundhouse kick from the right and left sides, aiming for his head and chest, which caused Kakashi to duck down and position himself for the incoming uppercut, which would have struck if Kakashi hadn't leaned back to avoid it. As he was dodging and weaving the attacks from the 3 Narutos, Kakashi thought, "Impressive, to coordinate the clones to position me for a follow-up attack." When he decided he had had enough, he killed 2 of the clones by catching oncoming kicks from both directions and slamming them into each other, causing them to burst, and then killed the 3rd one by dodging the incoming punch and chopping him on the back of the neck, saying, "3 down, now there are just the 2 others and the original." Not back Kakashi, "But how about we move on to the next part of the shinobi lessons," Naruto said as his 2 clones began to make hand signals. "Second part, huh? I guess he means ninjutsu. Wait, those hand signs," Kakashi thought alarmedly. Naruto then shouted out the name of the jutsu, Futon. Glitter Storm. Wind Release. Glitter Storm. A gust of wind then blew all the leaves around Naruto towards Kakashi at frightening speeds, demonstrating once more how he uses his surroundings to his advantage. Kaden. Housenka no Jutsu. Fire release. Phoenix Immortal Fire. Kakashi called out before he blew out several fireballs to destroy the leaves before they could reach him, creating a wall of smoke that prevented both sides from seeing each other. After the smoke cleared, Kakashi found himself standing alone in the clearing, with Naruto going back to his hiding place. He used the smoke to his advantage, but why did he challenge me in the first place? Unless, it seems he not only figured out the meaning of the test but also acted as a true shinobi should. Now to see if the other two picked up on what Naruto was trying to show them, Kakashi thought, looking at his other two students. How is the Dobi that strong? Well, no matter, he's still no match to a Uchiha like me. Sasuke was glaring at the spot where his teammate had once stood. Sakura, on the other hand, was searching for Sasuke and appeared to have paid little attention to the fight. Regretfully, it appears that neither of them understood what Naruto was trying to convey to them. Before he vanished from the clearing, Kakashi pondered, well, I suppose it's time to test the other two now that I've tested Naruto. Alongside Sakura was still searching for Sasuke when she heard something behind her. She turned around, thinking it was Sasuke, and was shocked to see her sensei's face with an eye smile behind her. Yo! Kakashi then dissolved into leaves that began to rotate around Sakura, putting her in a hypnotic state. Then, all the leaves vanished, and Sakura snapped out of it, saying, "Wah, what just happened?" As she looked around. Sakura, she heard from behind a bush. To her excitement, she recognized the voice as Sasuke, so she ran towards and around the bush, yelling, Sasuke.kun. What she saw, however, was a wounded Sasuke leaning against a tree, with several shurikens and kunai protruding from his body, one leg twisted improperly, and an arm severed. Sakura, help me. As Sakura fainted, the words, Maybe that was a bit too much. Her record said she was at the top of her class though. Kakashi muttered to himself with a drop of perspiration. Alongside Sasuke. Shinobi Fighting Lesson Number 2 Genjutsu. Sakura fell for it pretty easily, Kakashi remarked from behind Sasuke as he leaned against a tree. Sasuke became alert at the sound of the scream that filled the training ground. While studying the Uchiha, Kakashi thought, Genjutsu yeah, she would fall for that, but I'm not the same as them. And why do you believe that you're so different? I mean, Naruto seemed to fight pretty well. He seems so sure of himself. Well, let's see what he can do, Sasuke said. I don't know how the Dobi was able to do what he did, but I am a Uchiha. I am the elite of the elite. There is no way a Dobi like him could compare to me. Sasuke scowled at the mention of the Dobi's name. Sasuke then leaned down and took out several and threw them towards Kakashi, who easily avoided them. Kakashi could only sigh and shake his head at the audacious act of arrogance, saying, that arrogance will get him killed if he always thinks of himself superior to everyone. However, it appears that the Uchiha never intended to strike him with them because they struck a rope, which subsequently let loose numerous knives in Kakashi's direction. A trap? Kakashi dodged once more, this time into the air, as all of the knives went by him and impaled themselves in a tree. The Uchiha gave Kakashi a kick from behind as soon as he landed, but Kakashi blocked it before it could reach him and grabbed his ankle to lock him in place. However, it appeared that Sasuke wasn't finished yet because he punched Kakashi in the head while his foot was still trapped. The attack was ineffective once more, though, as it was caught in Kakashi's free hand before he was attacked by another kick from the Uchiha's other foot. In order to block the impending overhead kick, Kakashi crossed his arms while still clinging to the Uchiha's limbs. Sasuke then attempted to grab the bell with his free hand, but it appeared that this was all a diversion from his true plan. When Kakashi saw this, he released Sasuke and leapt back out of his reach, allowing Sasuke to barely touch the bell. I'll admit that was pretty impressive. He was even able to touch one of the bells, Kakashi thought at the moment, but he was in for another surprise when Sasuke began to perform a series of hand signs that ended on the tiger hand sign. He then reared his head back and puffed up his cheeks in preparation for the jutsu, thinking, Kaden. Gukakyu no Jutsu. Fire release. Great fireball technique. as he released the jutsu in the shape of a giant fireball that was headed in Kakashi's direction. What? Kakashi asked, thinking, a genin shouldn't have enough chakra to perform that jutsu. Below you, Sasuke said, answering his thoughts as Kakashi's hand shot up from the ground and grabbed his ankle. Doden. Shinju Zanshu no Jutsu. Earth Release. Double Suicide Decapitation Technique. The fireball then struck where Kakashi was standing, leaving a crater in the ground, but there were no signs of him. He's gone, in the air, no, on the sides, where is he? Shinobi Fighting Lesson Number 3 Ninjutsu. I'll admit he was pretty good for a genin, but he still has a long way to go, Kakashi thought as he was leaving Sasuke. But I have a feeling that Naruto still has more to offer. Sasuke was dragged into the ground up to his head with a yell as Kakashi squatted in front of him, looking down upon him. Alongside Naruto. It seems like the fight with me and Sasuke surprised and interested Kakashi, but he still has yet to reveal his Sharingan. But Sasakura, Naruto said, observing the fights between his team and his sensei in an attempt to assess the abilities and strengths of both sides. Who to start with? On one side we have an arrogant Uchiha who would rather die than work with someone and see them as an equal, and on the other we have a useless fangirl. I wonder if it's too late to try to get different teammates, Naruto thought, sighing at his team's composition. Naruto concluded he had gathered enough information and made the decision to try to get his team to work together to overcome this test. Naruto laughed to himself as he considered the last sentence. Well, it looks like Sakura is waking up now. I suppose I should try to get her to team up first before she does something stupid, and also seeing as the Uchiha can't go anywhere. After gathering his thoughts, Naruto began to walk to Sakura's location as she was awakening from unconsciousness. Hey Sakura, he said as he stood beside her, waiting for her to gain enough consciousness to comprehend him. What do you want, Naruto? Baka, wait, never mind, I've got to find Sasuke, she said, ignoring him entirely in order to locate her crush. Naruto's eye began to twitch, saying, calm down, you need her to pass this test. Sakura was looking for Sasuke when he ran up to her. He tried to get her attention by saying, look Sakura, I think I know what the point of this test is and how we can all pass, but she ignored him. When the two finally saw Sasuke's seemingly lifeless head, Sakura screamed once more and passed out once more. Naruto had observed, this might be more difficult than I anticipated. Hey Sasuke, I think I know a way to pass this test, Naruto said to his other teammate who was attempting to free himself. Quiet Dobi, I don't need your help, Sasuke replied without even looking at Naruto. Despite his attempts to calm himself, Naruto ended up receiving a tick mark. He said, calm down, just try again and make him see reason, I'm screwed. For a few minutes, Naruto alternated between trying to reason with Sasuke and attempting to wake up his unconscious teammate, but both failed. Sasuke refused to work with the Dobi due to his conceit, and it appeared that the fangirl was unconscious. When the bell rang to announce the test's conclusion, Naruto groaned because his attempts to get the team to work together had failed and now they had all failed. Alongside Kakashi. Sigh, sorry Naruto, maybe next time you can get a better team. Hey, that might even be a good thing. See this team, although the council is going to kill me once the Uchiha fails, Kakashi said, observing the entire time as Naruto attempted and failed to persuade his teammates to cooperate. In front of the tree stumps, clearing, Sasuke and Sakura were currently bound to a tree stump in the clearing, and Naruto was seated with a lunchbox in front of him. When Kakashi told the group, well, about the training, it seems like only Naruto will have to go back to the academy, Sasuke grinned and said, hey, it seems like the Dobi is still a dead last, unlike me who is an elite. Kakashi said, you two on the other hand, should quit as shinobi, effectively ending the pair's parade. What do you mean I should quit being a shinobi? Sasuke asked, glaring at Kakashi, and why not the Dobi? Kakashi's statement, because the two of you are just punks that don't deserve to be shinobi, caused the Uchiha to react by charging out in rage at their sensei, only to be stopped by Kakashi, who was now sitting on him with his foot on his head and his arm behind his back. Therefore, that's why you're a punk. Sakura gave him a perplexed look when Kakashi said, you are underestimating ninjas. Why do you think you were separated into teams? Naruto appeared to understand. The reason only Naruto should continue being a ninja is because he understood the answer and reason to the test, but you two continued to blow him off. For that I am sorry to Naruto that you failed and I hope you can get a better team next year. Sakura asked, answer, what does that mean, and how did Naruto figure it out? She received an answer, but it wasn't from Kakashi. The answer was teamwork. Kakashi responded, Naruto is right. The reason for this test was to get all of you to work as a team. Alone it would be impossible for you to pass, but if you worked together you would actually have a chance, confirming Naruto's response. Sakura yelled, What do you mean by teamwork? There were only 2 bells. Naruto responded once more, saying, the bells were only a distraction. The bells were never the means to pass, they were only supposed to make us try to work alone instead of as a team. Kakashi reiterated Naruto's response by saying, again, Naruto is correct, the test was made to make you fight amongst yourselves. The purpose is to see if you can forget about your own interest and work as a team. However, only Naruto was able to accomplish this. Sakura would constantly disregard Naruto and become fixated on Sasuke, while Sasuke would consistently disregard both of his teammates in order to work alone. While individual strength is vital, teamwork is even more crucial because if one member of the team disrupts the group, you risk endangering your teammates. Although he was watching the team to see how they would behave, Kakashi said, I'll give you one more chance after lunch, but this time I will make it even harder than before. Sasuke and Sakura are not allowed any lunch, and Naruto, if you feed them then you will all fail, before turning to leave. Knowing Naruto, he will most likely try to give his team some food. Now the only problem is whether the other 2 will accept the food. Naruto did attempt to offer the 2 his lunch, as Kakashi had inferred, saying, hey guys, since I had breakfast earlier I'm not that hungry, you 2 should eat so you can regain your strength. They both ultimately accepted the food, albeit not for the proper reason. Sakura was merely following Sasuke's example, but Sasuke only accepted it because of his conceit. That's right, Dobi, you should be proud that your food is being used by Uchiha. Kakashi charged directly at them and said, after I just told you not to, you do it the minute I walk away, as a burst of smoke exploded in front of them as soon as they both took a bite out of the food. You guys all, he began, continuing to charge at them as Sakura screamed and turned away, causing Sasuke to flinch. Naruto remained motionless, maintaining eye contact with Kakashi. Pass, he concluded with a smile. Sakura said, wait, what do you mean pass? With bewilderment. A ninja must see underneath the underneath, you 3 are the first who ever passed, and the others would always do what I told them, they were fools. A friend of mine once told me, those who break the rules and codes of the ninja world are trash, but those who abandon their teammates are lower than trash. That ends the training, you all pass, as of tomorrow Team 7 will begin their ninja duties, Kakashi said, giving a thumbs up. Naruto closed his eyes and nodded in understanding, thinking that he must be referring to Obito. Naruto cheerfully said, hey Kakashi, let's go get some ramen to celebrate. Sure, Naruto, I'll buy. The 2 then left the training ground and went to Ichiraku's ramen, but they forgot to mention another duo. Hey Untai US, how dare you leave an elite like me here?
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.